Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins and I'm here with Dr. Garrett Smith today of nutritiondetective.com. We were just meeting a few minutes before and I mentioned that it's through Alex Seck that we've connected. So big shout out to Alec. I know he's been literally all over the world in the last few months. And Dr. Garrett, it's fantastic to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, great. I'm just getting Rockfin going. So give me 1 second to, it was a little slow on the uptake. Never know. I am multi-streaming, very decentralized over here, I like to say. And there's the Rockfin link. Actually, that won't help you guys. Let me put it in the actual chat. Come and say hello in the chat. Feel free to share your questions. And I don't know if you know Dr. Garrett, but your interview on Alex's channel was controversial, to say the least.
That's pretty normal for me. That's normal wherever I go. I'm challenging basically everything out there, from alternative medicine to conventional medicine to, things that just people make statements on. And I go, show me how that works. Show me the research. Show me what's going on. People make statements about this detox is this and this detox is that. And I go, no, I could show you the opposite in the research, actually. So it's, I kind of get, I get resistance everywhere I go because, nobody wants to believe that what they're doing is wrong. And if I go out and I show them, like, this is why even the health nuts, are often some of the sickest people, You know what I mean? A lot of us know those people who are health nuts. They will absolutely do anything for their health. And they are some of the sickest people we know. So what is wrong? There's something very wrong out there with what we've been taught and what we think we know. So yeah, I get a lot of resistance.
I hear you. And so, I don't know each other very well yet, but I was diagnosed with a stage 4 lymphoma while I was being a health nut.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to do the best everything for my, their physical body and spiritual health, and going to India and sitting with the guru, thinking that was going to make things good and right. And it was a real board in the face shock to my system when that happened. Now, it did immediately reveal many things that I wasn't aware of with regard to health. And it's been a journey. I managed to survive it using esoteric tools, actually, of just discovering inside myself what was cooperating with death and not with life. It's a long journey. I wrote about that in my book called Journey. And so a lot of mysteries. And one of the things that inspired me to host you now for this interview, by the way, we are live on Facebook and X and YouTube, Rockfin, Rumble, and Vigilante TV as well. So welcome to all of the people. I can't interact with all of the chats from all of those channels, but if you're out there, then that's great. And so last year, about this time, maybe a month into it, I had a full stop with my digestion for the first time in many years. And I prided myself in my digestion. I thought, like, oh, it was so fantastic. I would have little bumps here and there, and I would see somebody, they put me on a supplement that it was probably 18 months that I'd been on this supplement, and it resulted in a total breakdown. They actually had me double up, saying that would clean my organs rather than just my gut. And it was I didn't digest food for probably 3 solid months. I lost every ounce of body fat and was working on the bone and the muscle. At that point, my body was trying to digest itself. And so this put me on a new track to really figuring out what digestion is. One of the things I want to get deep into is just the anatomy of digestion that I think is so badly understood. We'll go deep into your Toxic Bile Theory as well, which I found extremely interesting. I watched that interview twice very carefully. I'll just let you know, there are things right off the top that I'm a person who can open my mind. I want the truth more than I want to be right, more than I want to be comfortable, all of those kind of things. So you're in good company with all of your outside the box thinking, and there are still things that I might get a few challenging questions, and I'm sure you can handle it and you're used to it as well. For anyone that doesn't already know Dr. Garrett Smith, he's a licensed naturopathic physician and NMD in the state of Arizona. Since starting his medical practice in 2006, pardon me. He has helped thousands of people to fix their chronic diseases permanently through his focus on correcting vitamin A toxicity, specific nutrient deficiencies, and his paradigm shifting toxic bile theory that he approaches health with. Dr. Smith gets results for his clients that others were unable to previously. In his spare time, he enjoys training in the gym and shooting competitions. Oh, nice. That's in keeping with my son, actually, who has a very high value for that. He would like to be a gunsmith, which is not a common thing in Canada by any means. Anyone who knows anything about firearms in this country is like 80, going on their deathbed and not actively involved anymore. So I want to shout out to my son, who is Psycho on YouTube. He's a little too old for me to challenge what he calls himself in that platform, and he did the intro. He was playing for that, and the extra that's going to be at the very end as well. So you can sub to him on his channel. That's my promise to him every time I use his work to let you know that. And hello, Jennifer Pepler. Nice to see you. Glad you're here. All right. What's that?
Sorry, I was just saying nice to meet Jen too. She said that in her little chat.
Oh, nice. Very good. Right on. So would you like to start with just sharing what drove you into the natural health world in the first place? Any background that you'd like to share? I love the stories.
I'll try to make it, fairly quick. But so as a kid, I was always interested in, I first got involved in lifting weights. My dad got me a book on bodybuilding, one of those all full of guys on juice and all that stuff. And I started training with some dumbbells in my room, and that kind of leads to nutrition at some point, right? You start getting into fitness, and then all of a sudden you go, well, nutrition becomes important. And that led to me getting my degree. I got my first personal trainer certification at 18. I got my degree in physiology with a minor in chemistry and nutrition at school. And then, I was originally in mechanical engineering, so I love systems. Like, I love things that make sense. And people have told me, I've had people ask me if I was an engineer. I had a cattle rancher ask me if I was a rancher, because the way they observe things, the way they think about things is the way I tend to do them. I do tons of automobile analogies and stuff like that. So anyway, mechanical engineering didn't appeal to me once I found out about the career. And then I went, what do I do in my spare time? And it was lift weights. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll be a personal trainer. And then physiology degree followed after that. So then, after school, I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. So I worked in a supplement store, and then I worked as a physical therapy tech for a while, because I liked medicine, but I didn't want to be an MD. And I didn't have a lot of other options at the time. But while I was working at the supplement store, I found out about my naturopathic medical school in, 2 hours drive from me up in Phoenix. And I applied, and I was in kind of synchronicity. I was enrolled within a month of applying. Like, it just happened so fast, like it was supposed to. And then I got out of school, and then I moved back down to Tucson, which is where I'm from. And I opened my practice, and I've been through different phases over the years. Like a lot of people, health nuts, they go through they think this is the cause of all disease. There was like the Candida phase, there was the heavy metals phase, there was the low carb phase, and there was the paleo phase, and there was like all these things that I've been through. So I even went through the raw meat stage. That was in medical school. People still give me a hard time about that. They're like, so you still eating raw meat? And I'm like, nah, not. But yeah, so I went through all these phases, and sometimes they would help, and sometimes, most of the time they would get worse after. I call it the honeymoon phase, where people get on new diets, and they think they feel better right away for however long. It could be a couple weeks, it could be a year. They feel better, and then everything all of a sudden falls apart. This is super common. This is like your supplement story, right? It may have helped at the start, maybe it didn't, but then at some point it all just falls apart, which means that in my world, that something was building up behind the dam. There was something that was building up, and oftentimes the way we relate this is it's actually detox is slowed down. We can feel better short term by stopping detox. You could think about it in let's say, more like mental emotional medicine. Like, how do people most of the time make themselves feel better? They push down all their feelings, right? They just hide them, and they feel better for a while until the dam bursts. And then they've got some problem that they can't handle anymore because it's built up for so long. So the same thing happens in health. We can do cheap and easy things to make ourselves feel better. The long-term thing, like we were talking about with the truth and the reality, is that it takes work, and that avoiding the toxins is one of the biggest things that we can do to help ourselves. And then that gets into knowing what the toxins are, first of all. That's the biggest thing. So anyway, so that's how I kind of got here. I went through these phases, and then I started learning about, well, I was having over time, some of my biggest health issues that I had to deal with. I had terrible insomnia. I had some psoriasis. My psoriasis was never that bad, but I had some. I was developing urinary problems in my mid-20s in naturopathic medical school. My dad died of prostate cancer. So me developing urinary issues in medical school at 25 was really kind of scary to me, going, my dad's like, well, he died of prostate cancer I think it's 68. That was, so it wasn't looking good. Right. And then I had this middle back pain that nobody could figure out. When people say they've really tried everything, I kind of chuckle because I go, you don't even know what I tried for these things. And so I did all these physical modalities for my middle back pain. And I eventually, now I have fixed all of these things through the approaches that I do. Got rid of the insomnia, got rid of the psoriasis, got rid of the middle back pain, got rid of the, I think I said one other thing. But yeah, so what was happening was, as I was going through in practice, I learned hair mineral analysis 2013-ish, 2012-ish. And then in that, they taught us a lot about how vitamin D supplements will screw up your hair test. Well, I was back in 2012, 2013 using vitamin D supplements on people. And then I all of a sudden realized that these were causing problems. I mean, vitamin D, I don't want to spend too much time on that, but it's sold as rat poison. It's killed babies by being over fortified in milk. It's not good stuff. You want your vitamin D from the sunlight or UVB. And there's lots of other things in the diet that can make your vitamin D go up or down that have nothing to do with the sun or UV. So I got into that, and I got away from vitamin D. So at one point in my practice, I had to tell all my clients, all my patients at the time, we're not taking vitamin D anymore. And they're like, but you put me on. And I said, I was wrong. One of the things that people have told me that is different about me is that I'm willing to say it was bad information. And we have come to a new conclusion that we are not doing that anymore. And I'm sorry. And this is the way forward. This is where we're going. Not to mention Alex's podcast name, right? So then I had to do the same thing later on, my clients tend to stay with me for years. This is very normal for me to have years and years long clients. So I'm doing the hair analysis for a while, and then all of a sudden I have some long-term clients going, Dr. Smith, like I'm having a little trouble with fatigue, or I'm having a little trouble with my hair's been thinning a little bit or whatever. I was sitting there going, okay, when I have a client, I believe them. If they're telling me something, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, you're probably doing something I don't know about or whatever. I'll ask about it. And if they tell me, no, they're not doing that, or yes, they are doing this, I believe them. If they lie to me, then that's only going to hurt them. So I just assume that they're right. And they were saying they were having some issues. So I tried to do what I knew at the time. The thing that I'm getting at here is I was actually supplementing them vitamin A, either supplements like retinol palmitate or liver pills, or even some were probably doing cod liver oil. And then I was pushing the whole sweet potatoes and the carrots and the spinach and all the vitamin A foods. So somebody couldn't say that it was just synthetic stuff that was causing this. And they're getting these little nagging issues coming up, and I'm doing what I know how to do. And then finally, Grant Genereux comes along, a guy I knew, Matt Stone, who I wrote my book with. He says, you should check this out. And I was kind of like, at the start, I was kind of like, yeah, whatever. Then I came up again, and I'd actually told myself, if this comes up again, and it's not some little fad that just disappears real quick, I'm going to look into it. And I looked into it, got halfway through Grant Genereux's book. It's at Genereux, GGENEREUX.blog. He has 3 free ebooks. If you want to check them out, they're very well written. I was halfway through the first ebook and I said, I have to change. I sat back in my chair and I was like, I have to change everything. This changes everything. So then I had to go through and take everybody off of vitamin A. And I became Grant's an engineer. Grant's actually in Canada, but Grant's an engineer and he's doing what he can do. You know, it's not his forte to work with people. That's not what, I mean, he's doing engineering stuff. So I kind of took the mantle and then I became the vitamin A toxicity guy. And I was really digging through the research, and like on the live streams I do each week where I'm presenting research the whole time, like tomorrow, the episode tomorrow is we're going over gluten because we have people who I'm not going to say I fix it. They have fixed celiac and gluten intolerance doing these approaches. And I'm going to go over the research of how this all connects to the liver and toxic bile. And we're going to show that like celiac as an autoimmune condition, autoimmunity is always toxicity. That's what it is. So is cancer. Cancer's toxicity. So we just fix these things. We help people to know what to do to fix them. We have concepts and principles. We don't have protocols. And they go and they do it and they get better. So, so that's kind of how we got here. And I've been doing the low vitamin A stuff for about 6 years now. Grant's at 10 years. So people can't really tell us that vitamin A deficiency is a thing much anymore because we've been avoiding it for 6 to 10 years.
Wow.
And I'm still, one of the things I like to point out is my skin is amazing. If people think that if you don't have vitamin A, your skin's going to be terrible. I have amazing skin. If people saw that I was a little pinkish at the start, that's because I was still flushing from my niacin. My niacin flush was still going on a little bit. But the other thing is eyesight. They say skin and eyesight. I have amazing skin. And as you hear, I do shooting competitions, which is pretty eyesight heavy, if you know what I mean. So obviously these things are not falling apart. And so we're just demonstrating in the real world that these things, it's not what we were told. Absolutely. So that's that.
That's a good nutshell. Thank you very much. To start off with, also, what was it like for you in the pandemic? How did that go? We have to speak in code because I'm
yeah. No, I totally
you get that part. Yeah.
I am very good at avoiding the YouTube censor stuff.
Trigger words.
So, yes.
Good. Excellent. Thank you.
So during that, well, the funny thing was as we were getting to when that all started, I was realizing that the people who I was working the best with and the people who were finding me were mainly finding me over the internet, and I was doing a lot of distance consults. I mean, I've had clients in 28 countries over the years. So it was like I was talking to Julie, my practice manager, who is still with me. I think we're on 11 years now together. I said to her, I said, why do we have an office when like 95% of our people are over the internet? And she was kind of like, I don't know. And I said, could you work from home? Because I could. And she said, sure. And so then we did. We just decided to pick up the office and we started working from home. And that was about 6 months before the whole thing started. So it was
perfect.
I know I am a very lucky person. And some people think I'm well protected in those types of ways. So anyway, so we did that, and things happen along the way. I mean, I was never one for any shots, never one for any of my family to get any shots. And then we just got through it and built the Love Your Liver network along the way. And now then I got onto Twitter, and then everything started building. And then Alec and other podcasts and all that stuff just kind of came along the way. I wouldn't say that the nice thing was doing distance work and not having an office made that whole process quite easy on me. I didn't have a lot of challenges because I couldn't imagine those places where everybody's having to wear masks and all that stuff. It was just insane. So yeah. That was not too big of a deal. I have presented a lot of one of my videos, one of my live streams is on EMF. And the potential EMF connection, as many people talked about, you probably remember the 5G thing.
Totally.
And what I go over in that live stream is I go over how well, I'll give a real quick synopsis here. Electromagnetic fields, right? EMF. So think electrical, right? Conductive. What is the most conductive metal that we use all around us every day? It's copper, right? With copper wires. That's what we run electricity through houses and all that stuff with. Okay, so copper is very conductive. You could say copper is very electric. Well, if you had too much copper in your system, might you become too electric? One of the symptoms of copper toxicity is a lot of buzzing feelings, tingling, buzzing, that kind of thing. So we have the electrical connection, and I deal with copper toxicity in people every day. Then the other part of that word, magnetic. Magnetic is iron. That's the most magnetic mineral that is around us generally at all. So if we have iron overload, we could become too magnetic. And this, if we're thinking we are this biochemical, bioelectrical, magnetic, all this stuff, then if you put the wrong minerals in there, too much of them, it will mess up the flow of everything. And I have people, I used to be very electromagnetically sensitive. I used to especially when the insomnia was bad and I had an EMF tower across the street from my office that they built while I was there. I can see, as when I was going through my really bad insomnia, I can see how people can kind of lose their minds from not sleeping. I was able to feel that and witness that. Yeah. See, so I was kind of going, oh my gosh, they're like trying to get me and all this stuff. And I went, oh, okay, this is not right. And then as I fixed that, as I learned what I do, I'm not electromagnetically sensitive anymore. So if we can fix your electrical stuff and your magnetic stuff, then all of a sudden, okay, am I saying EMFs are good for us, like the NN EMF? No, I'm not saying they're good for you. They can mess you up a lot more than they have to if you are too electrical and too magnetic. So that was one of the fun things that we kind of figured out during that. And then the viruses, well, what we call viruses, I believe are simply evidence of a toxicity state. I know Alex's work where they're showing, these things coming up in the same, they have the contaminated sample and the uncontaminated sample, and they see the same cytopathic, you're familiar with all of that, I'm sure. Yeah. So they see the same things, and I go, but they put toxins in the thing. So it's just remnants of toxicity. And then we just, so I'm not going to say that what they see isn't there. There's obviously, Alex been showing that there is something there. What I'm saying is that it's remnants of toxicity. And in that EMF video, I go over how EMF can cause us to dump bile, which is toxic, the most toxic fluid in our body. And then that leaks into your bloodstream. And then they do these tests, and then they see evidence of toxicity. And people feel bad because they just dumped tons of the toxicity that they stored in their liver right into their system. So we'll get into that in the toxic bile theory stuff. But yeah, that was where I really started to, and I had quote unquote, the virus that went around. I had an episode, of that, those detox symptoms, which is really what I look at them as. It was, there was something that happened during that time. Absolutely. Something happened. I think it was EMF. And it was the worst flu I'd ever had by far. And I did my antibody blood test afterwards because, why did I do that? Because I wanted to be able to get out of any of the shots. So I did that, and it came up positive. So does that mean I believe in viruses? No, not at all. But yeah, so that was a very interesting development in terms of toxic bile theory and the flu and the coof, as I call it, and all these things. So yeah.
Nice. Yeah, I'd like to jump in. At some point, I looked up the etymology of the word virus and found out its root in poison, right? Like, of course. And this is the great poisoning, as far as I'm concerned. There's nothing else going on. I know a lot of people talk bioweapons and all kinds of things. I mean, I guess that can be defined in a number of different ways. But the onslaught, we should all be dead by now, don't you think? Like with the constant spraying in the air and the accumulation in food and water. And what do you think?
I think humans are amazingly resilient. I think with how many things they've thrown at us, humans are absolutely some of the most resilient things on the planet. Now, other things I think in their strategies depends on if you're into the ideas of looshing and all those other things and all that, but they need us alive. However, the sicker we are, the more fear we have and the more negative emotions we have and all these other things that they could, in theory, if they were trying to collect these kind of things, then they could do that. So they want us alive, but they want us sick and fearful and all that stuff. And I absolutely agree with you. I tend to not jump into all the nanobots and the spike protein and all these things. No, it's just a good old poisoning. Absolutely. They're just poisoning people. And people want to believe that what is getting to them is something bigger and badder and like more evil than just being poisoned. I don't, all these things like the nanobots and the tobacco juice and all, oh my gosh, I'm like, give me a dental anesthetic. And it's like, it's just getting nonsensical. Yeah. I actually, in the EMF video, I go over some stuff about retinoic acid, which is vitamin A, active vitamin A, being tested as an adjuvant in vaccines. And I go over research showing retinoic acid being put into lipid nanoparticles and all these other things that are very interesting in this poison that is, well, retinoic acid has also been linked to causing something called myocarditis, which is really, really interesting when you start putting all these things together, and then it's a proprietary blend inside these lipid nanoparticles. Yeah. That means they don't have to tell you what's really in there. So yeah, it all gets very, very, very interesting. And I just keep it as, and what we see. So people will ask me, do you deal with the spike protein or do you deal with this and that? And I go, no, I like Lyme. I have people get better from Lyme on my program, and we don't even talk about Lyme. How, you see what I'm saying? Like, so we just get people healthier. The idea would be, if your body can fight these things off, shouldn't we be focusing on making your body healthier instead of trying to fight it off? It's like teaching a man to fish, right? We want your body to be as healthy as it can be, because like, I always joke about this. Like, if we think bacteria could kill, a bacterial infection could kill an elephant, like, do we not think that the bacteria in your gut could kill things, or that your immune system could kill things if that's what it actually does? I think the immune system is a cleanup crew. It's not some army going out to fight. It's just cleaning up garbage. And if it doesn't clean up the garbage well enough, you accumulate garbage. You realize what that would do in your house, right? It would make your house stink and people would be getting sick. Same thing in the body. You don't clean up the garbage, you get sick. So yeah, it all connects. I need to do it. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to act. So resilience, it became a buzzword. It's funny, pre-pandemic, that word went very public and was used a lot. It was interesting to position us as needing to be resilient before, the greater poisoning came on. And to what degree do you think it's adaptation? So there was, just as an example, I think there was up to 6 weeks of no trails in the sky. And that was new because it has been so consistent and, day after day after day. And then it was just gone, like they were on vacation or they ran out, or, what was the thing behind it? And I just had a little idea that because we're always, receiving these in our body at some level, and then to the degree that we're adapting and like, not just staving it off, but we're actually adapting to accommodate for this in the environment, and then taking it away would slow down that adaptation or make that adaptation obsolete. Do you buy into any of that?
Well, I have a little different perspective on it. I think the end point is the same.
Okay.
So lots of people out there will be able to relate to this. So if I'm guessing, I've seen it myself. So let's say people are working really hard on a project at work, like a super stressful project, or somebody's got the end of the semester's coming up and they're really studying hard and they're staying up too late and they're eating, both of these situations usually end up in people not getting enough rest. They're eating crappy food. They're not exercising. They're stressed out. Just think of this combination, however it happened in your life. And then all of a sudden the test happens. Boom, it's over. the project is done, boom, it's over. You go on let's say somebody plans a wedding and all this stuff, and they're really stressed out about it, and then they go on the honeymoon, and then they get sick as soon as they go. As soon as you remove the stress, they get sick.
Yes.
Get sick. Right. So what is going on? Well, why did all of a sudden, so think about this. You're talking about 6-week break. What happens when we stop? Okay. The hardest thing for some people to understand is that toxins coming in slows down your detox. Like it actually, I mean, I could show this in the research. So toxins slow down your detox. So all of a sudden they take away the toxins, and then your body starts going, okay, it's time to start. Like they say with cigarette smoking, right? People smoke cigarettes and all of a sudden they take a day off. They start kicking stuff out. 3 days, 7 days, they start kicking. Then all of a sudden they're hacking up stuff, right? They had to stop the detox or the intox. Sorry, they had to stop the intox so they could then start the detox. And then they start coughing up these horribly colored black, green, yellow things out of their lungs because they're just detoxing. But they were not doing it while they were intoxing. So when people were doing the bad food, the no exercise, the excessive stress, the whatever else was going on, they were intoxing and they were slowing their detox. And then all of a sudden they go on their break and they let go of the mental stress, and they maybe, who knows about what they're eating, but they just start resting, right? They're just, and then they get sick. So a lot of people have had this happen. Yeah. And so that's what you can do. You can, I mean, what they talked about in what Grant's early thing in the vitamin A detox was he would call it, people would be going along and they'd be feeling either, nothing or better for a little while. And then all of a sudden they might feel a little worse. He called it the detox setback. I'm like, no, they just started dumping bile. They just started getting healthier. And all of a sudden now they're starting to kick out the stuff and they feel worse. There are ways to mitigate that, but sometimes it's just, detox is not all like fun and games and unicorns. We don't want people constantly suffering, but going through little cycles of it, that's very normal. That's very normal. So yeah, I think exactly the same thing. We are very resilient. Give us a chance to start detoxing, we will. The problem is many of us have been taught that if we feel bad at all, we should shut that down. And that's where people get into what's the strongest things to shut things down? Drugs. That's how we shut it down. But are drugs poisons? Yes. So you're putting poisons in to shut down the poisons coming out, and then you end up more poisoned. It was like somebody the other day, I did a post on oil of oregano on Twitter. Oil of oregano is really toxic, really shuts down detox.
Oh, good. I quit that a long time ago, and I have no desire. Yeah.
Well, somebody on Twitter was like, no, I use it all the time on all these things. And I'm like, you're using it all the time because you're not fixing the problem.
Right.
And the problem's just trying to come out and tell you, fix me, and you're just shutting it down again. So yeah, it's really interesting in the whole herbs and supplements and meds. And I mean, most meds are based on 70% of medications are based on plant compounds that they just tweaked to get a patent. So does that mean drugs and herbal compounds are like directly related almost? Yeah, I mean, that's what they're trying to do. So nobody has an herb deficiency, as I say.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. So you would say that there's no adaptation going on. Do you think that's or did I interpret that wrong?
Well, adaptation, it's well, if we think about it in terms of other toxins that we're familiar with, alcoholics, are they adapting? They get less drunk,
right,
from the same amount of alcohol. Well, we could say, is it an adaptation? Yes. Is it a positive one or a negative one? So then they can drink more alcohol, so that it's still the same amount of stuff coming in and damaging them, but they have less symptoms. So in terms of adaptation, I tend to think that if we look around, well, the thing we have to also know is that toxicities and deficiencies are handed down generationally. They don't just go away. It's something like 60, 70, 80% of kids in hospitals are born jaundiced these days. Being born jaundiced means your liver is damaged to begin with. Ouch. Like it's not keeping up. So when that's happening, we're saying, and then people will be like, but my grandpappy ate this way. And I'm like, what your grandpappy ate is still affecting you potentially today. Because if, the men mainly are passing on damaged sperm. But the women, and I mean this in just the most basic way, the women are the ones that the babies are marinating in. Like whatever is in the woman that's being passed down, and women hold more toxins than men because they just make body fat easier. That's just women detox slower than men. It just is the way it is. They make less bile than men. They make fat easier than men to store toxins.
Right.
Because they're trying to keep it out of the bloodstream, so it's not going to the baby as much, so anyway, so these things, they just get passed down. This is why a lot of women, ladies out there, if you want to see a real life example of this, is often the first child is the healthiest, and then you see each child after that is sicker and weaker, and they don't do as well. That's the general pattern. I could show you this over and over and over, because the mom is becoming more toxic over time and more deficient.
Right.
So that happens from mothers to their children, and from them to their children. If it's not fixed, it just keeps getting handed down. So are we amazingly resilient? Yes. Just because your parents or your grandparents did something doesn't mean that that was good. It means they got away with it, and it may have been passed down. We have a lot of fallacies in people thinking why they're healthy or why they're not. And the reality is fat soluble toxins are handed down in the fat.
Right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So interesting. Just since you brought up them, that women detox slower than men, I do want to, at some point, just bookmarking a discussion about potential differences. Now, even saying it this way, I don't totally agree with it anymore, but differences in how men and women heal. And even culturally around that, I'm sure you've noticed many. Well, let's talk about that right now, since I brought it up. What do you notice there?
Well, I mean, we do see, like I mentioned, women have higher levels of vitamin A in their blood. That's in the research. Women make less bile than men. That's in the research. We can look around and understand that women tend to store body fat more easily than men. That's partially a survival adaptation. So, if there's no food, they can keep feeding the baby the breast milk and all that stuff. Like, some of it's adaptation, some of it's gender specific. Women also, sadly, women today use many more cosmetic products, and they're using many more chemicals that, if you don't know this, ladies, anything you put on your skin is going into your bloodstream. It doesn't mean all of it. It means it's going to your bloodstream. They can show this with sunscreens. I forget the other thing I just saw the other day where they put it on the skin and it was in the blood the next day. So there's a saying, like, if you want to get as hardcore as you can with this, it is, if you would not eat it, do not put it on your skin.
Right.
So, and men just use less products than women. Men also tend to go, this is a good and bad thing. Men tend to go to the doctor less than women. So men are going to just have less exposure to pharmaceuticals and all that other stuff that's damaging them. Men don't do birth control. Yeah. Birth control is, of all the things that people come to me about, women being damaged by birth control is probably the biggest one. I mean, people come to me for Accutane and other stuff like that, but birth control is absolutely destruction. Absolutely.
Again, because of toxicity, or is it something different with the synthetic hormones?
No, it actually, it's been shown. So here's a funny thing about the work I do. When I go and I do my research, I need to put up the big Twitter thread on this. It's been known since 1975 that birth control raises the levels of vitamin A and copper in the blood.
And what about it would raise that?
So, okay. Oh, well, now we're going to get into toxic bile theory.
All right. That's okay.
So, okay. Should I just dive into the whole thing right now then?
Just dive right in. Let's do it. The only thing I'd like to preempt was something, and this might take a week, so you can, as you'd like, but an anatomy of digestion, right? So you put food in your mouth, and then what happens? Right?
Oh, gosh.
I know. Is it too
I don't want to, well, I'll kind of go through the basics of it.
Sure.
So obviously, folks, you want to chew your food really well. There's a reason you have teeth.
I'm the slowest eater on earth. My parents trained me as a child to eat slow. I eat way slower than everybody all the time. So I'm a chewer. Anyway, go ahead.
My aunt is like the slowest eater around, and I don't know why. I think I got it from my mom. My mom's like a super fast chewer, and I am too. So I have to remind myself. Anyway, so obviously I love when people are like, humans aren't supposed to eat carbs. And I say, then why is the very first enzyme in our mouth amylase, which is designed to break down starch? And why do we have all these big flat molars and we don't have giant sharp incisors? We have incisors, but they're not giant and sharp. Humans are omnivores. That's the thing. We're designed to eat. This is why we can thrive so many places, because we can eat just about anything.
Would you throw the word scavenger in there?
Well, I mean, if you want to think of scavenging as gathering, I don't know how well we do with like carrion, like dead meat, like that's just been sitting there rotting. I don't think we do so well with that. So I kind of take us out of the scavenger thing. Right. I think that we are opportunistic. You know, we can live just about anywhere because we can find stuff to eat just about anywhere. And you know, there are people, I see people who seem to do just fine as vegans. Very rare. It's rare. But I've seen it, and they tell me they don't feel good on meat. And I go, okay, here's what I want you to try to do in your diet. And that's okay. And then I have people who can hardly tolerate any, you know, plant matter at all. And they're like all muscle meat carnivores, and they seem to do all right. And I'll say, well, just, you know, let's try to tweak it a little bit this way. And that's about it. So, and then there's everybody else is somewhere in between. Anyway, so obviously the mouth and chewing stimulates the whole digestive system, gets it going. It tells you what to do. If you're going to drink liquids, don't drink them cold, because your whole digestive system is warmth. Every healing method has always talked about the digestion system being warmth. The Chinese medicine, they'll say, you know, ice is for dead people. So you want warmth in your digestion. Okay, so then down in the stomach. Okay, stomach acid, it's supposed to be there. It's gonna be there generally if you're not unwell. Some people will say, well, I have low stomach acid, or I have GERD, or I have ulcers, or whatever. Okay, so now we're going to get into, it's kind of hard to skip ahead and to go down the digestive system in order, because we're about to go backwards.
That's okay.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump forward to the liver and the bile.
Okay.
So if I'm jumping ahead for some people who are kind of new to the whole anatomy of the digestive system, and this is still technically the digestive system, bile and the gallbladder are the digestive system. People get into the idea of detox being like your liver does detox and your kidneys do detox, and then they just kind of leave it at that. Even practitioners, like you'll see people on social media saying they're the deniers of all this. They'll say, well, if your liver and kidneys are working fine, then they're detoxing you and you don't need to do anything else. And I'm like, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because systems start breaking down and going slower before they finally collapse, right? So collapse is the last thing. There's usually a lot of signs before it, and things are gunking up the engine along the way. So anyway, your liver, when we talk about it detoxing, your liver does three main things. Your liver is a filter. By definition, if you look up what a filter does, your liver filters your blood.
Right.
It pulls stuff out of your blood. That's what a filter does. I can't believe there's people like out there saying the liver is not a filter. And I'm like, that's exactly what it is. That's how it would start to detox, because it pulls stuff out of your blood so then it can process it. Anyway, then the liver is a storage depot. The liver accumulates things. Like when people talk about you want to eat, they want to eat liver because there's tons of vitamin A in it, and there's tons of copper in it, and there's tons of all these nutrients in it. It's storing them. It's accumulating them. And it's been shown to accumulate toxins. I had a chapter of a book showing since it was in 1906. And they're saying the liver accumulates these toxic metals. And so people are still out there saying it doesn't accumulate things. And they say it doesn't store things. And I go, well, store is just a different word for accumulate. If you want to see if the liver's holding something in the research, use the word accumulate, and then you'll find it. Okay. So anyway, so it accumulates things. And then the liver is like what I call a sewage processing plant. It takes things and it runs them through a process. And then, the key thing is the liver can make those things it processes less toxic, which is what everybody assumes. It's not just that. Look up biotransformation. The liver can take these things and make them more toxic along the way. And people go, why would it do that? And I say, I don't know. I'm not the designer. It's just maybe we're not supposed to be exposed to these things so much. Vitamin A is something that as you consume it, like beta carotene is probably the least toxic of them all. The carotenoids are probably the least toxic. And as it goes through, it eventually turns into retinoic acid, the same thing as Accutane, the same thing as Retin A, the same thing as these alitretinoin, 9-cis-retinoic acid that they use for chemotherapy. Like it turns into these things. So that's the liver going through its detox could actually make things worse. But the key thing here is after the liver's done all these things, the stuff has still not left your body. You know, the kidneys taking stuff out that was in the blood, it still hadn't left until it has left your system. Like if you sweat out toxic stuff, sure, you sweat it out, but now it's sitting on your skin doing whatever irritation it does. It hasn't really left the whole system yet. So there's that. So then when we get into the bile, okay, bile is made by your liver. Bile helps with some of your digestive functions.
Bile isn't made by the gallbladder? It's the other way
No,
around?
okay. No, this is a good question. This is a good question. So bile is made by the liver. It is, if the way you want to think of bile.
Stored in the gallbladder. Got it.
Yeah. The bile is, the best way to think of this is the bile is your liver's poop.
Yeah, I heard you say that. That's very enlightening, actually.
and so you want to get rid of the bile's poop, because it is, if the liver processes all these things, how does the liver get rid of these? I'm doing like the triangle of the liver here. The liver gets rid of these toxins into the bile. Like that's how it gets rid of them. But just the liver dumps them into the bile ducts. The common bile duct is the biggest one up at the top. And then what it does is you have valves that then cause it to back up into the gallbladder. So you fill up the gallbladder. The idea of the gallbladder is a storage, a holding kind of cell for the bile. And then when you eat a meal, the gallbladder contracts and pushes the bile into the digestion, so it mixes with the food.
Into your stomach?
No, it's into your intestine. Sorry, it's right after. So the stomach goes down to the intestine, the small intestine, and then the gallbladder, the bile duct is right after that juncture. So the gallbladder and the bile ducts are right after the stomach. Okay, so the reason why I believe we have a gallbladder is to hold that bile and to dump it out when the food comes around, because the bile is super toxic. Like I've got research showing the bile will eat holes through the liver cells that make it. The bile will eat through the bile ducts in the liver. And if either of those two first things happen, the bile can then leak directly into your bloodstream. Most toxic fluid in your body leaking directly into your bloodstream.
Is that leaky gut?
Not yet. No, we'll get to that. Okay, so then we have bile going. You can eat holes through the big bile ducts, the common bile ducts and the other bile ducts. So that can leak into your bloodstream there. That's called extrahepatic cholestasis. It's outside of the liver. Extrahepatic is outside of the liver. The one I just talked about before was intrahepatic, inside the liver leaking. So if people look them up and they're wondering the differences in the two, it's still the same problem. It's bile getting into your bloodstream and then going everywhere in your body. So then once it gets down into the intestines, then you have this toxic bile. Well, let me go over the biggest problem with vitamin A and toxic bile. Have you ever heard of a retinoic acid chemical peel or a yellow peel?
Yeah.
Okay. So a yellow peel is, they use retinoic acid. They put it on people's faces. It dissolves the upper layers of cells. And then the body responds by making new cells underneath it. So you get that little baby butt skin look for a little bit. So you're dissolving cells. And in a dermatology journal, a dermatologist referred to it as inducing a controlled wound to the skin. So they're saying we can determine how much we wound the skin by how much we use.
Right.
Okay, so how does your body get rid of vitamin A? In the bile. What if you are putting a chemical peel? So there's retinoic acid, vitamin A in that bile. You're putting a chemical peel on your intestines. It is dissolving skin. That's what it does, but it's uncontrolled.
Mm-hmm.
So then we get leaky gut. Now I could show you in the research that bile, as the word they use is modulates, which is controls intestinal permeability or leaky gut. So we have that going backwards. Now let's go into the stomach real quick. I don't know what makes this happen, but your bile, I did a whole episode on GERD and reflux. The bile can go back up into the stomach. Now bile overall, even though it has what are called bile acids in it, bile overall is alkaline. Okay. So you have this alkaline bile going back up into your stomach and then neutralizing your stomach acid.
Exactly.
So then you get low stomach acid. And then you have this bile that can eat holes in your intestines called leaky gut. Well, what is eating holes in your stomach called? Ulcers.
Ulcers, yeah.
So then as the bile goes up a lot, then you can get into Barrett's esophagus and it's just eating holes everywhere. This stuff is really, I mean, the more toxic people are, the more damage it causes. That's just the way it is, because the more toxic you are, the more toxic your liver is. The more toxic your liver is, the more toxins it puts into the bile. The more toxic the bile is, the more it eats holes and causes you symptoms all over the place. So then that's leaky gut in a nutshell. Nobody's ever, as far as I know, nobody had ever explained leaky gut in a way that actually made sense. Like when people say gluten causes leaky gut, and I'm like, a wheat protein is eating holes through your intestines? Like, it didn't make any sense to me. Well, when you start what I'm going to go over in the gluten episode tomorrow, the celiac folks dump more bile when they eat gluten. So if they dump more bile in their intestines and it's eating away at the villi, right? It's eating away at their gut lining. They have bigger problems with it because it's eating away. They have more bile to eat away. It's just a dose dependent thing. So then we get into, everybody talks about the gut biome, right? So everybody talks about probiotics and good bacteria and bad bacteria and all this stuff. Well, I could show you other papers that say that bile modulates the gut biome. Okay. I mean, that's the stuff that's washing over.
Oh, so sorry.
It happens. It's live.
So sorry.
So I just hope sometimes that people who are in the house don't come in the door. Or I'm like, come on now, we're live. So anyway, but bile is washing over your gut biome multiple times a day. That is going to either, that bile, what's in it is going to encourage good things to grow, or it's going to encourage bad things to grow. Obviously, if you feed one, you're going to feed either the good or the bad. And so as your bile gets worse, it makes sense that it feeds more of the bad stuff. Here's the interesting thing about bile and your gut biome. Your gut biome can take the bile and turn it. So your liver makes primary bile acids, which they're not, some of them are better than others. Some are better than worse. There's something like 56 of them in the human body. So it's hard to categorize them all. But that bile, the primary bile acids go into your gut. Now, if you have a gut biome problem, your gut biome turns some of those primary bile acids into what are called secondary bile acids. Those are even more toxic. Then we get into what's called the enterohepatic circulation. So entero means gut, hepatic, liver. So gut to liver circulation. So what this means is, so your liver makes bile. The bile goes into your intestines. This is kind of like the skin. This is the thing that people have to realize about your skin and your gut. They are going to absorb whatever you put on them. They are not picky. Your skin is not like, ooh, these sunscreen chemicals are toxic, I'm not going to absorb them. It doesn't do that. It's going to absorb them. Your gut is going to absorb whatever's on it. So if your gut biome is making secondary bile acids, well, your body reabsorbs stuff from, I call it the food poop, because it used to be food, it's turning into poop, it's kind of in between along the way, so I just call it the food poop. It's just easier for people to understand. You're reabsorbing stuff from that the whole way through the gut, for better or worse. So if you just make more secondary bile acids that are worse, you reabsorb those through the gut and they go right back to the liver. And then you've just taken that. We only excrete in a standard American diet. You only excrete 5% of your bile in the poop daily. 5%. So 95% of it's being reabsorbed. So do you see how this becomes like a vicious cycle if it's becoming more and more toxic every time you run through the system?
Exactly.
This is why we call it aging.
Right.
This is why generally we're just like, yeah, you just kind of get sicker as you get older. No, it's because it's a negative cycle and you keep getting more and more toxic. And it's just looping around.
Yeah, just a quick thing. I was on chemotherapy. I tried to avoid it like the plague, but it was actually my naturopath who convinced me to go that direction in the end. And I was very well aware of the reabsorption function of your gut, because you would get a primary sickness from the drug, and then once it really circulated into your colon, there was a whole new level of sickness. And I was able to mitigate a lot of that with colonics. I don't know how you feel about that. We could maybe get into that later as well.
Colonics, colonics are fine. I have no issue with enemas or colonics. Not everybody wants to do them.
Mm-hmm.
They're kind of a sensitive area, but for people who are willing to do them, like, okay, so let me give you an example of how we look at, let's say, a coffee enema in toxic bile theory.
Mm-hmm.
So bitter things tend to induce bile dumping. That's why people take bitters for their digestion, right? It's dumping bile. Well, why would they not be dumping bile? Well, one of the things that happens is the more toxic, here's the weird thing. The more toxic people get, generally the less bile they make. However, they're not getting rid of it. So then what's happening to their toxicity? Their toxicity is growing. So that means any of the bile that they make is extra toxic because it's more concentrated. They don't make much.
Right.
So we have that problem.
Mm-hmm. And so can you forgive me with a question? Like the function of the bile in the first place, is it not fat digestion? Is there part of it?
That's the main thing we're sold on.
Okay.
Is that it is, and so people tend, and you may be getting a little bit, and this is very normal for people who first hear my work. They're like, why do you hate bile? Like, we need it and we're designed to have it. And I'm like, no, I don't hate it. Mm-hmm. The problem is it's toxic and it's leaking into the bloodstream. So you need bile. Like, how do they induce SIBO in animal studies? How do they induce small intestinal bowel or overgrowth or bacterial overgrowth? Sorry, bacterial overgrowth. How do they induce that? There's a dog study where they wanted to induce SIBO, and what they do is they tie off the bile duct so that you don't get bile into the intestines. Especially in the small intestine, the bile prevents pathogenic bad bacteria from growing out of control. So the bile does, yes, it helps with fat digestion. Yes, it helps with keeping certain pathogenic bacteria down. Yes, it may even help certain what are called bile tolerant bacteria to grow more. Okay. What I tell people is that what we're doing here is, by the end of all of this, and this is what we see, you're going to be making more bile than you used to. You're not going to be leaking it into your system. The bile is going to be less toxic. So we are not like anti-bile. That's kind of like what conventional medicine does. And what a lot of alternative medicine does is they just shut it down. And that's why people, okay, so imagine this. Why does stopping detox help people feel better? A lot of the things that people use slow down their bile production even more. So if you're not making bile as much, you can't leak as much. So all of a sudden, you're not intoxicating your own bloodstream with toxic bile. And then you feel better and you go, oh, I'm cured. And then, you get off the thing. And then later the same problem comes back, or the problem comes back worse, or it may come back as a new problem. People don't realize that oftentimes they're just trading one disease for another. They just change the recipe of their disease into, it just looks different because it's a different, I can show in the research, I do this almost every week on my live stream. I show that the recipe of the bile is what's in the bile. And I'm talking all the things like toxic metals, fat soluble toxins, the bile acid profile, like just the recipe of the bile is what creates the various symptoms. And so you can change the recipe of the bile by doing all sorts of things. And then you can, then the amount of it leaking into your bloodstream is how intense the symptoms are, right? Like you can double a recipe and you have twice as much food. Well, you can double the amount of bile that you leak and you will have twice as bad symptoms. That's a, general idea there.
Yeah. Is there a difference between a leak and a dump when it comes to bile? Because you want the bile dump, right? Like if it's the poop of the liver, then that seems good.
This is one of the hardest concepts in all of toxic bile theory for new people to understand. Once we understand, okay, so you're going to dump bile like that. When we're talking about dumping bile, we're talking about generally the gallbladder or just the liver can just squirt it out. So you're just thinking of like the bile squirting wherever it's going to go. Right. So if we're talking about intrahepatic cholestasis, if the liver makes a bunch of bile and it kind of squirts it out, it's going to go right into the bloodstream. Oh, what happened? Sorry, my screen went a little funky there. Okay. So the bile squirts out from the liver, it goes right into the bloodstream. If the bile squirts out from the gallbladder or the liver into the intestines, it's going to go wherever it's going to go. It's either some of it's going to stay in the intestines, some of it's going to leak out. Okay. So when we talk about a bile dump, we just mean that the liver or the gallbladder is squeezing out some bile, like a toothpaste tube. Okay. The leaking is what happens where that's what we don't want, which is the leaking into the bloodstream.
Right.
Or going back up into your throat, and then people, vomiting bile and other things of that nature. So nausea, GERD, vomiting bile, like that's bile in your stomach. Morning sickness. Okay. I have a paper that says that what they call subclinical cholestasis. So what they're saying, subclinical cholestasis. Subclinical means the doctors know it's there. They know this cholestasis problem. We'll get into that in a second. They know the cholestasis problem is there, but they're saying based on their lab tests and their imaging, they can't see it. Like they can't diagnose it based on their numbers and their visuals. Okay. Cholestasis means cola is bile, related to bile. Stasis is stagnation. So stuck, or we could think of it as going backwards or going into places where it shouldn't go. So if you think of a stagnant river, right, it's not moving, and it may start flowing other ways because it's backing up. So that's that. When you think of cholestasis, just think of bile leaking into the bloodstream. Okay. So they're saying it was a paper. At the end of it, they said basically subclinical cholestasis, subclinical intrahepatic, so direct in the bloodstream, cholestasis of pregnancy can be considered normal these days. Like it is normal for pregnant women to leak bile directly into their bloodstream.
Darn it.
Normal. And they're saying, and we can't prove it. We know it's there. We know it's happening, but we can't show it on blood tests or lab tests. And it's just unreal. So it's happening. It's happening all over the place. And the sicker somebody is, the worse their bile recipe, and probably the more they're leaking. As we get people better, then this is part of my saying of the bile is the cause of and the solution to your health problems. So the cause of it, the leaking. How are you going to get rid of all these toxins that are stored in your liver? You have to get them out through the bile. So the bile is the solution, but it's also the cause. So what we talk about is when people push detox too hard, well, they may be causing, inducing bile dumping too strongly. One of the ways people can do this is like heat. Okay. Anybody ever go to the sauna and stay in there and it's too hot and they come out of it and they're absolutely wrecked for days?
Yep.
That's what they did. They just dumped a bunch of bile and leaked it into their system. That's why they felt bad. It wasn't of course they could be dehydrated, but we're assuming that they knew what they were doing in terms of drinking, but they still wrecked themselves. Or you go out and you work in the sun in your yard too much, and the amount of exercise wasn't something that you couldn't handle, but the sun and the exercise together wrecked you for a couple days. This is what we're talking about. This is why people who are very sick often can't exercise. Exercise will cause bile dumping. So the dumping is when we learn about the triggers, like if you're not well, we assume you're leaking. Okay. Then we try not to unnecessarily or too aggressively dump the bile because that will flare up your symptoms. We still want it to come out. And what we do to facilitate the body removing it is soluble fiber helps adsorb it or soak it up. And then charcoal, if people can take it and it doesn't constipate them too much, charcoal really soaks it up. So we do these things. So I wanted to head back to the bitters and the enemas thing that I was heading into.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Thank you.
So bitter things generally stimulate bile dumping. Okay. This is because they're bitter. A bitter taste is a mark of a toxin. The bile is how we get rid of toxins. Oh, you mean bitter things induce bile dumping because the body's like, get rid of this stuff. Okay. And people are very familiar with coffee. Coffee without all the cream and sugar, if people don't know, is quite bitter. A lot of people don't know that because they just always drink it with these other things. So coffee stimulates a bile dump. That's part of why coffee helps people poop in the morning. The amount of bile in your intestines, in the research, you can show if there's not enough bile in your intestines, you're constipated. If there's way too much bile in your intestines, you get diarrhea. Okay, so you want to be somewhere in between those. Okay, well, so if somebody doesn't have enough bile in their intestines and they're constipated and they have symptoms, where do you think the rest of the bile is? It's in their bloodstream. That's why they don't feel good. So anyway, so you go and you do a coffee enema. You brew up your coffee enema, and then, you know, you put it in, and then you get, you know, people can feel better from this if they do them often enough. Okay, what are they doing? The coffee's triggering a bile dump. The enema itself is inducing basically diarrhea. So the liver's pooping the bile into the intestines, and then the amount of water in there is triggering, but along with the bile is triggering diarrhea. So it's like a bile removal of that bolus, that squirt of bile.
Right.
So if people do it enough, and I'm not saying for people to get hooked on these, one of the things I don't like about enemas is people can get hooked on them. They can become dependent. So but I also know people who so they'll have a migraine, right? And they know that if they do a coffee enema, within an hour, the migraine's gone. What did they remove from the system that fixed their migraine? What if I told you that one of the most classic symptoms of vitamin A toxicity is headaches? How do we get rid of vitamin A? The bile. What does a coffee enema do? It helps you get rid of a big bunch of bile so that then you're not reabsorbing it back into the liver and leaking it into the bloodstream. And that's why it takes an hour for that cycle to kind of clean out, and then your liver can catch up on it. So yeah, we have amazing results with headaches. Go ahead.
Yeah. So then that's good. What you're talking about. Now I know good and bad is a very hard term in health, because you're looking at each individual circumstances in that respect. But you ultimately want to release toxic bile.
We want to make it, and we want to facilitate it going the right. So that's the key thing here is we want to make it well. We want to make it not toxic. We want it to go into the intestines where it's supposed to go, and then we want to poop it out on a normal basis or get rid of it. So that's why a lot of people will be like, "Oh, I heard fat dumps bile," and it's like, fat also, yes, fat triggers a bile dump, but the fat and the bile together, that's how you absorb bile and fat again, would be to put them together, and then they go back in the system together. So you're kind of reabsorbing the bile better the more fat you eat. So we have to understand how all these things work together so we can maximize it. But also I'm constantly telling people, especially, okay, so here's the other thing about men and women on the detox thing. Men in general tend to be a bit more of a hard charger type than women. And I can't tell you how many, I was one of them in the beginning, how many hard charger type men I get who come in and they're like, I'm going to detox the fastest anybody's ever done. And they push everything to the limits. And then they come back to me and they're like, Dr. Smith, I messed myself up. And I'm like, did you read all the warnings I said about don't push too hard and go slow and watch your symptoms? And if it doesn't feel good, then back off. And they're just like, yeah, I still did it anyway, because I do that. And I'm like, I understand, I was that way. And the thing I like to relay to people is that the reason why you don't feel good is your bile. That is the cause of you not feeling good. So then if you try to push it harder, it's already been kicking your butt enough that you're coming to me, and now you're going to push it harder and you're going to wonder why you feel bad. Yeah. You don't want to do that. So, it's, everybody's got to learn somehow. I mean, with the detox stuff, everybody learns at some point how or why they pushed it too hard. You don't, it's like kids don't learn that the stove is hot sometimes until they put their hand close enough, or if they really need to, they touch it and then they get a burn, right? So some people just have to feel the burn. Some people are really scared of doing it, and so they almost never push at all. We have the two sides, right? There'll be the people who are so scared of making anything worse that they don't do anything. They kind of stay stuck. And then there's the people who are like head on and they do too much. And then I'm supposed to fix what they caused because they pushed too hard and they didn't listen to any of the warnings. So,
right.
But yeah, that's the hardest part of all of this is I sometimes talk about the bile as it's like nuclear waste. And I'm not getting into the whole nuclear thing here. I'm just giving an example that people can picture, right? You're going to make it. It's toxicity is in your liver. Like the power plant of the liver is making the toxic waste. And then you have to transport that outside of you. The goal is to transport it outside of you with as little damage along the way as possible, with as little leaking as possible. And that's the hard part. That's where people, and then one of the things I do different than everybody else is, as opposed to like your doctor who was like double down on your supplement and then things went bad. We don't do that. We say, if something doesn't feel right, like your body's feedback, if it's saying this doesn't feel good, we listen to it. We back off. And I'm teaching people to actually listen to their body and giving them the okay of saying, I don't care what your brother takes in terms of that supplement. If you don't feel good on it, you don't take that much. It's very simple. We're not the same as anybody else. We are all, one of the analogies I use is, it's like we're all cars. Okay. Some of us might be semi trucks and some of us might be little economy cars. We all have spark plugs and we use gasoline and we have wires and we have all these things, but they're different sizes and they need different types of gas and different types of oil. But they all need oil. They all need gas. They all need spark plugs. They all need tires, different size tires, different air pressures. Like it's all, so we are the same, but different. There's variations. And that's where people haven't been given, like if your doctor says you're going to take 5 pills of this and you're like, well, I tried 5 and it was horrible, but I can take 1 and then I feel kind of better. And if the doctor's like, no, you need to take 5 to do this, that's just not listening to the body.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I've had a shoulder thing since. This would be interesting to hear from your perspective. Since I had, a bad flu last year in November, and it's still to this day. And I've, so now I'm seeing a chiropractor. I know there's more than that, but there is, and I saw X-rays of my spine. It's pretty mangled, and she kept asking me, "What severe accident have you been in?"
Right.
Like this. So I'd be curious what you think about that. I also want to talk about the alkalinity of bile because that might be completely unrelated because people are always pushing an alkaline diet. And I think it's totally a psyop.
Yeah. Well, I mean, here's the idea of it. There is no, like, people will say, oh, if you push alkalinity enough, like cancer can't live. That's okay. You push alkalinity enough, you can't live either.
Right. Your stomach is acid. It ruins your digestion.
Right. Alkaline water going down and neutralizing your stomach acid. And then people, it's just what we want is one of the things I learned in naturopathic medical school, which was really quite profound, was this one teacher. He said, okay, most disease comes about when places in the body that are supposed to be alkaline are too acidic and places that are supposed to be acidic are too alkaline. And I was like, wow. Like sometimes these, it's like we want it to be, I call it the Goldilocks effect. You don't want it to be too hot. You don't want it to be too cold. You want it to be just right. What does conventional medicine do? They say, oh, if it's too cold, make it hot. If it's too hot, make it cold. If it's not working, take it out. If you're missing something, we'll put something back in there. It's like, it's just, they do the opposite of whatever it is. But yeah, the pH thing, I've had people come to me doing the alkaline diet. And they were monitoring their pee and I don't know if they were doing saliva, but they were at least monitoring their pee. And they said that as they got more and more alkaline, they got more and more health problems until eventually this one guy told me, he's like, my teeth were falling out. And I'm kind of like, that's too alkaline, obviously. So we can have too much of either. Could people be too acidic? Sure. Could people be too alkaline? Sure. What we want, our goal is to give the body control of it. The body's amazing, like resilient, right? That's the body's keeping track of all these things and balancing all these things. It's when we try to come in from the outside, as an example, the antioxidant theory of health. Okay. They're like, eat more and more plant antioxidants because oxidation is causing all these problems. Well, oxidation is how you break down toxins. The biggest way the body breaks down toxins is through oxidizing them, including vitamin A, including bile acids. So the body oxidizes toxins. So if you take in a bunch of antioxidants, it directly gets in the way of your body's ability to detox.
Right. So vitamin C is like the most popular antioxidant, right?
Vitamin C has been shown to shut down alcohol dehydrogenase and aldehyde dehydrogenase, which are two of the most important detox enzymes in all of vitamin A detox, more than any other sugary drink that they tested in the study. I did a whole live stream if anybody wants to see it. Scurvy is vitamin A toxicity, and I show all of that in the video.
Wow.
Like, none of my people on a regular basis take any vitamin C or worry about getting it from fruits or any of that stuff. And then there's the whole muscle meat carnivores out there who don't eat any fruit at all, and they're not dying of scurvy. So vitamin C is kind of the whole vitamin thing. If you just start doubting just about everything about the vitamin thing, you're on the right track. So yeah, there was just the alkaline thing. Yes, I think it's an oversimplification. It's like, are there problems with certain types of meat? Sure. Does that mean a vegan diet's the answer? No. Are there problems with a vegan diet? Sure. Does that mean like all muscle meat is the answer for everybody? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that just because something's not working, we have to run to the opposite side. Mm-hmm. So what was the other part you were asking about?
Oh, I can ask you two questions in there. Darn, what was the first one? I only had the second one written down. I'm
trying to remember myself. Anyway,
can anyone in the chat remind us? I could.
I knew I was going to forget that first part if I went to the second part, but I wanted to hit the second part because I felt like that was the easier part.
So sorry. Yeah, totally. I should.
We can move on to the next one. Maybe we'll remember it as we go.
So I'm curious about sensitivity. Yeah, exactly. Maybe something will remind us. And so I consider myself a canary in the coal mine. If there's a dryer sheet someone's using on the block, I know it. If there's, you get in an airplane and you can just feel the poison the whole way along. And is that a sign of bad health to be sensitive, or is it a sign of good health?
Okay.
Oh, the chiropractor. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, we'll go back to that.
Oh, wow. Oh, yes, definitely. Somebody remember that one, the bone thing, because I just found a study on fish, and it was their vertebrae were actually, they were giving them retinoic acid and their vertebrae was misshaping. So it's like, and then wow. There's what does vitamin A toxicity cause in newborns, infants? It causes central spinal defects. Like, yeah. So anyway, we'll come back to that.
Okay. I wrote it down.
What was this? What? Give me a synopsis of the question we were just on.
Yeah. So is sensitivity a sign of greater health or less?
Okay, I got it.
Lesser.
So some people are just wired to be more sensitive. This is just the nature of it. It's like I have people who I call sledgehammer people. And I joke that like they're like, I don't feel anything. I take this supplement, I take this med, I don't ever feel anything. And I'm like, okay, you're a sledgehammer person. You don't feel anything unless I hit you with a sledgehammer. It's just, there's the canary in the coal mine, and then there's the sledgehammer people. The sledgehammer people, I tell them, the thing I have to remind them of is, okay, you are here talking to me now because you feel something. You don't feel good. That's why you're here. So you obviously feel something. Now your job is to do your best. Like we become better at what we pay attention to, right? If we're paying attention to things, we generally become better at them. So these people, I'm having to tell them, pay attention. Like you're trying to notice, like you take these pills or you do whatever, and you're trying to notice, do I feel any different? Like that's your job now, is to pay attention. Okay. Then we have people who just, they're like higher doses of things. They just need to take higher doses of things. I'm sensitive, and I also tend to do better with higher doses of things. I can just take more. The problem with the sledgehammer people is they can really mess themselves up because they don't feel much, right? So they can keep taking things, and they're like, well, my doctor said to just keep taking the statins. And then all of a sudden, then they got problems later because they never felt bad from them. Whereas my mom, example, they put her on statins like years ago. And she's like, within 2 days, she's like, my legs hurt. And the doctor's like, no, that can't possibly be happening. That takes 2 weeks. I was like, wow, you just told her that the side effect comes. It's just she's having it too soon. Oh my gosh. So there's that. Then we get into sensitive people. And I deal with a lot of sensitive people who come from other practitioners because the other practitioners don't listen to them. Or they think that, they think it's mostly just women making a bigger deal of things. And so they do the old antidepressants and birth control and anti-anxiety meds. And that's how they kind of try to get women to be quiet. They're just like, go home with these and just don't worry about things. It's terrible. It's disgusting. So sensitivity, is it a sign of, well, I will tell you that it's possible your shoulder is related to gallbladder.
Interesting.
These things can be connected. Okay, well, let me just go over my middle back pain that I never figured out. Okay, my middle back pain, I realized after all these physical modalities, I tried to fix it. One year, I think I was just out of medical school, and I decided I go to a chiropractor who does mainly nutrition, and he was doing muscle testing on me. He came up with, I kind of had a hunch of what it was going to be, and I go into his office and he tests, I forget which one he tested. He tested like gluten. He's like, okay, you shouldn't eat gluten. I said, do me a favor, let's shorten this up. Test tomatoes and test dairy. And he tests them and he's like, don't eat those. Don't eat gluten and dairy and nightshades for a month. And I said, okay. It was like the start of December. So it's like holiday season, right? And I thought, okay, I'll go home and I won't do it. And I didn't eat any of those things for a month. And at the end of the month, not only had I gone through the holidays and I lost a couple pounds instead of gaining them like everybody else did, but the middle back pain was gone. And I was like, wow, this is wild. I know what I need to do now. And I realized later that it's actually probably my adrenal gland that was referring pain into my middle back. And as I fixed the things that were stressing my adrenal glands, which was these toxic foods, I was able to get out of that pain.
So how do you know, I'm sorry to jump in, but how do you know, like when the pain's gone, how do you know the difference between the suppression of the pain's gone, like you've slowed your toxicity compared to feeling good, pain gone, and it's of greater vitality?
Well, you would be looking at all the other signs and symptoms that you have. Like if overall things are going better, it's part of it is the framework that we have. Like I can look up in the research and see, like when people are out there taking quercetin, the bioflavonoid. Okay, I can go into the research and show you how quercetin slows down bile production and slows down ALDH. So we have these frameworks where we can go research them and go, this is slowing down detox. And if they're not essential things, then we have that's always a good sign that it's kind of like giving a drug-like effect. Then we have, I mean, generally, we generally get people to do less of things. Like, I mean, I'm sure maybe you've been one at the time. I was one at a time, a supplement addict, where people are taking pills and pills and pills and pills and pills. Like there was a time in my life where I was taking 50 pills a day. Yep. That was when I was working at a supplement store.
Been there.
And funny story was my girlfriend at the time, who's now my ex-wife, she said, that can't all be good for you. And I was like, no, it's good. I read about it at the store and looked in the books and whatever. And she goes, this was the most profound thing she probably ever said to me. She said, your liver has to process all of that. Mm-hmm. And that, even though I was not into the liver as much as I am now, I was like, you're absolutely right. And she said, and do you even feel better from all of that stuff? And this is like questions that I would ask people. Now I was like, do I actually thought about it. I was like, do I feel better? I'm taking 50 pills a day. I should feel amazing.
A lot better. Exactly.
And I went, okay. So I stopped them all the next day. And a couple of days later, I realized I felt better. And I went, okay, we're not going to do crazy, stupid supplementation anymore now. So Jen, I'll get to that. I'll get to the sledgehammer. The sledgehammer people just either, okay, well, let me finish up with the sledgehammer since Jen asked that question. Then we'll get to the sensitive people more. Okay. The sledgehammer people, they need to try to pay attention. If they can't get there, if they're just not wired for that, then they have to rely more on testing. We have to have some sort of tertiary way of looking inside their system to tell, like, how's your zinc doing? How's this doing? How's this doing? So we can know like what they need, because they can't tell us, well, I feel good on this amount of zinc and I feel bad on this amount of zinc, so we'll do this. We have to kind of see what they've been doing and then adjust as we go. So that the problem being a sledgehammer person is they need more testing, because they're if you want to call it their intuition or their biofeedback or whatever is just not as good. That's just the way that is. So then we go to sensitive people. Okay. Some people are just wired to be more sensitive. They just are. Like I said, I'm kind of a sensitive person, but I tend to do well. I tend to need higher doses of the things that I do well on. I mean, being a 200-pound male kind of does that. So with sensitive people, it can be one of two things. And with your exposures in the past, like with chemo and these other things, there's probably still some remnants and some other damage that's been done, and they may still be hanging around there. I have a guy who he plays baseball, adult baseball, and he's had lots of issues with his shoulder. And as we've gotten his liver and his gallbladder better, his shoulder's gotten better. We just can't there's this little last hump we haven't gotten over, that we really want to fix for him. But we have people all the time on the program. They're like, this pain went away, and I never would have thought it was toxicity that was related to it. And I go, yeah, I don't tell people it is toxicity. I just tell them, do these things in your diet, and if this goes away, hey, it was connected. That's all we know. Mm-hmm. So, okay. If you're one of those folks, you walk down the laundry aisle and you're like probably headaches, and you just run away, right?
I will run away. I can feel sick right away if I get trapped in a synthetic environment or a synthetic fragrance environment as well.
So
I can't hug you. I can't wear that coat that I hugged you with.
Yeah. So what that is most likely is your liver's a little. So you've gotten to a point in your day to day where you've avoided enough of these things. You've minimized them. They're not in your environment where you feel fine.
Yeah.
The whatever the situation is that you're doing health-wise may or may not be getting rid of some of the toxicity that you have stored. So it's still there. Like, remember that enterohepatic circulation? It's just kind of going around. So then when you get in environments where there's more toxicity, and let's say it's coming in, you're breathing it in, or it's coming in through your skin or whatever, your liver very quickly goes, oh no, we can't process this as well as we need to. It's building up in the blood, and it sends you a signal going, get the heck out of here and don't go by this stuff anymore. It's a defensive thing. It's the thing about being a canary in the coal mine kind of thing. The sensitive person is, the good news for you is that you have signals to get away from this stuff very easily.
Exactly.
You can tell things that are toxic for you very, very easily.
Exactly.
The bad thing is they do tend to affect you a lot more than other people when you are exposed. So what we've done, I mean, we've had multiple people with multiple chemical sensitivity, and they usually have EMF sensitivity too.
Which I don't, oddly enough.
Okay. Well, you may have, like, instead of the copper and iron more, you may have more of, like, we call them organic compound stuff, the stuff that fat soluble toxins, other things of that nature. Anyway, and you may just be sensitive. And that's just, if you've always been this way, it's either you've always been toxic, or if it changed at some point, that's when you got toxic. So we just get people, the thing about, let's say, people who are slow at detox, there's also genetically slow detox people. Just like people are born that can run faster than others, people are born with slower detox than others.
Right.
So does this change anything we do? Like the concepts and principles that we do? It doesn't change a thing. It does mean that people who are either more toxic or who are slower at detox, it simply means that they just have to work harder. It's the burden they bear. But when we had one woman, she started the program with me, and she was so sensitive to chemicals, like she had to sleep out, sensitive to chemicals and EMF. She had to sleep outside on concrete in Phoenix in the summertime because she could not live inside the house at night.
Yeah.
We had her back to full-time work in like 6 months.
Amazing.
Now, I'm not saying this is every time, but it's when people don't know what the most important toxins are. I mean, the worst toxin for people would be the one that people think is good for them, that they try to eat more of, like eating a rainbow or eating egg yolks or eating, dairy, raw dairy even. We have people who try to get better, and maybe they listen to a lot of what I say, but they go, oh no, I think Dr. Smith is wrong on raw dairy. If you're vitamin A toxic and you want to get out of it and you keep doing raw dairy, I can tell you, I've had tons of people who are like, I couldn't get out of it until I stopped the raw dairy.
What about human breast milk?
Okay. This is a tough question.
Uh-huh.
First of all, before anybody tries to twist what I'm saying, I am absolutely a fan of the simple saying, breast is best. Okay. There is no formula. Formulas are trying to poison babies just like dog food is trying to poison dogs. Like your dog is sick because they put vitamin A and carotenoids and all sorts of other crap in the dog food. Vitamin D, vitamin E, all sorts of crap. They do the same thing with babies. Prenatals, toxic. Multivitamins, toxic. Like baby vitamins, toxic. They're all just, they're poisoning us from different angles. They just can't do it. They can't make any one product be too toxic because then it would be too obvious.
Right.
So they have to put it in from all these different sides. So I got off track there. We're talking about sensitivity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So
sensitivity, and then also just, because you're saying don't do the raw dairy because there's a big raw dairy movement right now, and then just threw in the breast milk thing, because
the breast milk thing. Yes. So okay. So people will. This is an argument that people use. They'll say, "Why is vitamin A in breast milk if it's not supposed to be there?" And I'll say, "Do you know that there's like rocket fuel in every breast milk sample taken in the U.S.? Does that mean that there's rocket fuel? Like rocket fuel is supposed to be there, or is it possible? I mean, I think I had this other paper from Scientific American or something where they found 40 different toxins in breast milk. I have another paper where they made the mouse mother vitamin A toxic, and then the baby mouse was nursing. Baby mouse died from vitamin A toxicity. Like I have the paper. It's from 1950s. This was an amazing study where this guy studied multiple different types of animals and humans. He showed that synthetic vitamin A was the same as natural vitamin A. He showed how much the mouse was detoxing vitamin A through the milk. They had another mouse where the mouse was getting sick from the mother's milk, and they took the mouse off the breast milk. They put it onto normal mouse food, and the baby mouse recovered because it was not being poisoned anymore. So this is a tough thing. Like women detox fat-soluble toxins into their breast milk. I mean, it's coming out of a fatty tissue, right? It's got toxins in it. And as people get more toxic, they often gain more weight. Now, you're kind of an undertype. That's something we talk about. I don't know if we're going to have time to talk about that. Undertypes are different than overtypes. But like if you look around today, most people are overtypes and they're overweight. And they have on their labs, it's like generally high things. Then there's like undertypes who tend to be underweight and their labs are generally on the lower side of things. And these are patterns that I've figured out with people. It doesn't change what we do. There's just different indications and slightly different needs that people need. So yeah, breast milk. Like I know my ex-wife, she was less toxic. I think I in the health nut phase I was in between our two kids, I think I helped make my ex-wife more toxic. And so my son, my second child, has more health problems. He actually became anaphylactic to tree nuts as a baby. Well, what was I? This was me being smart. This is me. So I want all of you out there to realize that I fell prey to all this health nuttery crap that's out there, and I damaged my own son from it. I read, right, goat milk is healthier than cow milk. Okay, so I got the goat milk. And as my boy was weaning, we started adding some goat milk to the breast milk that my ex was pumping. And then eventually we got to just goat milk and we had weaned him off of breast milk. Goat milk has like 4 times as much vitamin A in it as cow milk.
Oh boy. And that's why they consider it more digestible.
Yeah, it's just the fat globules are just smaller. So I'm like, okay, whatever. Now I'm like, I was paying $14 a gallon for a goat milk basically back then. It was pretty wild.
Right.
And he was going through a gallon a week of it at a baby. So anyway, then we were doing the baby foods, right? The sweet potatoes and the carrots and the spinach in there. And oh my gosh, it was like, now I go, yeah, I contributed to my son's illness. We've now gotten him he was allergic to 3 nuts. We have removed 1 fully from that list. I think we're going to get the second one very soon. And then we'll see about potentially getting the third one and having him be the first child that his allergist has seen outgrow a tree nut allergy. She actually told us specifically she has not seen a kid outgrow a tree nut allergy. And I'm like, we'll get him there. I have a whole show on anaphylaxis and allergies with vitamin A and toxic bile theory and all this stuff. Anaphylaxis is a massive bile dump into the system. You want to hear a funny thing they found in dogs with anaphylaxis versus dogs with just allergies? Dogs with anaphylaxis, on the ultrasound of their gallbladder, they could see in every one of them a hole in the gallbladder. A hole in the gallbladder where it could leak bile into the system. And then I'm going, anaphylaxis is a bile leak.
Wow.
In the system, a massive bile leak. They saw a hole. That's how big it was. It wasn't leaky gut. It was a hole. So we start to connect all these things, and then, and they say, oh, and sepsis looks a lot like anaphylaxis. And now we start going, okay, sepsis is just bile leaking into the system. So we may need things like in emergency situations. Like, does my son carry an EpiPen? Yeah. He's going to, knock on wood, never had to use it.
Mm-hmm.
But he carries it because in an emergency situation, we have to sometimes shut things down.
Right.
But once we are out of that situation, we want to make the system run the way it should and not shut it down. So that's where conventional medicine is good at shutting things down. They're the best at shutting things down. That's what they do. Yeah. We don't want to go there for our little sniffles and our little issues, because then they just shut things down. And then the more you shut down detox, the more toxic you become. And then then you have to shut it down harder. This is why, like, as an example with chemotherapy, they start with the basic chemo. And then as when the cancer returns, they start you on the next chemo, and that maybe shrinks it a bit, but not all the way. And then they put you on the next one, and they just keep escalating because they have to give you more and more toxic stuff to shut it down harder. And then eventually you can't shut it down anymore, and you're just so toxic that it's all over. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't say that my cancer didn't kill my dad. The 5th round of chemo killed my dad.
Right. 11 months of chemotherapy brought me to a near-death experience. And the near-death experience itself put me in remission. So I was confirmed to be diagnosed, having gone through a profound healing experience in letting myself die. It wasn't the end, though. I was re-diagnosed in 18 months with the same cancer, and I knew it long before they did. Whether that's the same cancer, the same toxicity, and the lymph is a little bit of a different system. I'd be curious to hear what you have. I know I'm taking you all over the place.
No, it's fine.
It's a good thing you have a channel people can go and listen.
Well, one of the ideas of cancer, like with chemo, in toxic bile theory. So chemo is particularly good at shutting down the bile production. So here's how I'm gonna link it up, right? There are people who say you can do high dose vitamin C, like really high dose, like IV vitamin C,
for sure,
to make cancer go away. Okay. Yeah. And they also use chemo to make it go away. I'm telling you that, okay, vitamin C is one of the best things that's slowing down your bile production. That is the least toxic.
Right.
Okay. There's a thing, here's an idea about like what vitamin C does. So like I used to take 8 grams a day of ascorbic acid for my allergies, to shut down my allergies. If I didn't take it, the allergies would come back, right, within a day or two. So I'd take 8 grams a day to shut down my allergies, which is a bile problem. There's a thing called rebound scurvy. It's kind of hard to find on the internet these days. They've kind of scrubbed that away. But rebound scurvy is the idea that people who are taking high doses of vitamin C, if they suddenly stop, within 2 or 3 days, they will start to get scurvy symptoms. Remember, I called scurvy vitamin A toxicity. Well, what if you stop taking the ascorbic acid for a couple days, your liver starts making and pumping out bile again. That toxic bile comes out, it leaks into your system, and you get toxicity symptoms that they call scurvy. How could you get vitamin C deficiency symptoms in 2 or 3 days when you've been taking grams and grams and grams? That doesn't make any sense. The bile dumping again makes sense. And then the problems come back that were there before. Okay. Chemo shuts down bile production.
Could I just say one quick thing? So my naturopath was cautious about vitamin C. He did some vitamin C therapy, but most people don't know Linus Pauling, who was the big proponent of that, died of cancer.
Yes.
And on his deathbed, he said to my naturopath, "Don't use too much vitamin C."
Oh my goodness. I didn't even know. Well, I mean, I wouldn't have known that.
He realized it himself. Yeah, go ahead then.
Yeah, he was taking 18 grams a day for 20 or 30 years. I mean, he got on it because he had prostate cancer, and then he died of prostate cancer. So it didn't fix anything. And I know another guy, he's like, yeah, a woman, a client of his got on vitamin C IVs. She lived longer than the doctors gave her, right? Her oncologists were like, you got like 6 months to a year. And I think she lived like 5 years. And so, yes, vitamin C is a way to shut down your detox. That is not very toxic. Okay. Like if people are going to shut their stuff down, vitamin C is one of the best choices you can do in terms of the least damaging. Okay. But so vitamin C IVs, right? They eventually run out because you can't suppress it enough. Rebound scurvy is showing that it's coming. You're dumping the bile again. So then we get into chemo. So what does chemo do? Chemo shuts down the bile dumping and production. So you're not leaking bile into the system. Cancer tissue is actually shown to have really high levels of ALDH, which is one of the most important detox enzyme in the body. So cancer tissue why would cancer tissue have really, really high detox enzymes in it? Unless it's toxicity. So the cancer tissue can actually process some of these toxins itself, as long as it's not being overloaded with the toxic bile. And then the cancer can kind of work itself out and get out of the system. Okay.
So a tumor is working for you, not against you.
Yes.
Nice.
Tumors are toxicity storage tissue. They are specific. This is why we call them cancers, kind of like dumb tissue, right? They're like, it doesn't do what normal tissue does. It's kind of like dumb tissue. And then people think it's like somehow malicious and it's coming after you. No, what it is it's very specific toxin storage tissue. And it can process toxins on its own. Like I said, there's tons of ALDH in most tumors. So it's trying to protect you from, it's creating, like, think of it, if you have too much crap in your house, like just too much stuff, what do people do? They get a storage unit. What's your body making for all the toxicity? It's making a storage unit. We don't like it, but it's got to put it somewhere. It cannot get rid of it fast enough. This is the thing that people don't understand is that they're like, well, why can't the body just get rid of it fast enough? And it's like, well, why can't you just get all your work done and not have it back up? And they're like, well, because I have to do it all, but I can't do it fast enough. Your body's the same way. Mm-hmm. It has to process these things, or else it has to shove them somewhere.
Yeah, it's order of operations too, as well, right? That there's triage and priorities.
So chemo shuts down bile production for a while, right? You put in this toxin, it does its liver stuff. It slows down the bile production for a while. The body's able to shrink. The tumors are they don't need to be around as much. That's why cancer can disappear, is if it doesn't need to be there. Like if you don't need to pay for the storage unit, you stop paying for it and you bring all the stuff home. So the cancer shrink, right? And then the effect of the chemo on the liver fades with time, right? Your body's trying to get rid of it. It's getting this poison out of you. It's trying to, and then all of a sudden they go, oh, well, that didn't work. We need to go in with another poison, a stronger poison, and then we're going to shut it down stronger. And then so now you've got a liver that was toxic already. You added the chemotoxicity to it, and then you have to hit it harder to shut it down even more. And then it never works it doesn't tend to work as well again the second time. And every time they just try to hit it harder with things, you get less and less because you're making the system more toxic as you go. So any of the bile that leaks into the system is then more toxic after that. And that's why it's a kind of a robbing Peter to pay Paul kind of thing. Right. So if you can get out of the loop like you did, that's great. However, all these things, I'm an expert in like the biochemical and the detox and the nutritional part of this. I also work on myself a lot in terms of mental, emotional, and old issues and stuff like that. Like people need to work on it's not all chemical. That's not my area. So I know I need it. There's exercise and physical stuff. Like you need to move your body to be healthy. You need to put the right things in it. You need to help your body get rid of toxic things. And then you need to work on this too. It's all part of it.
Right? Emotional, spiritual detoxing. It's, to me, the entire solution. There's no need for reprogramming whatsoever. This is my soapbox that I get on, and this is my whole subject that I teach and coach in. Yeah.
Well, for a lot of people, the funny thing is, for a lot of people, if they, as we've seen, like hypoglycemia, like when people get low blood sugar, they start acting real weird, right? Or they start having issues come up. It's been said that like 90% of the guys in jail are hypoglycemic. And they probably did the worst things when their blood sugar was bad. I mean, we're talking hypoglycemic, not necessarily it's going to show up on a blood test, but they get symptoms when they don't eat. That's what I'm talking about. Everybody knows this pattern.
They get hangry.
They get hangry. Yeah. So if, let's say, these people have really bad thoughts and their brain goes bad places when they don't eat often enough, or because they have chemical problems that they can't maintain their blood sugar, what if we just fix that toxicity and we fix their blood sugar problem, and then all those thoughts just go away and they didn't have to do any work at all? Like, I mean, so there's the chemistry part of it. Like, if your brain is not running on the right chemicals, it's going to run wrong, right? You put the wrong gas in your car, it's not going to run right. So we can fix some of this stuff. The cool thing is when we fix the chemical part and we remove that from the equation, then people can really see how much stuff is left of the mental, emotional, spiritual stuff that wasn't just chemistry, right? Then you're just cleaning up that last layer. They could be big for some people, but for a lot of people, it just becomes so much easier to work on. And I'll give another example. Physical stuff, like, if you break an ankle, you're going to have to rehab it, right? Your body needs time to fix the structural parts, and it needs time to reorganize the neural part, the nerve part. Let's just call that the mental, emotional part, like how to make your ankle work right. So if we fix the chemical part from people, and let's say, like, I think somebody was in the chat saying they were fixing their lower back stuff. If we fix the pain part of the lower back stuff, then so the chemical part is gone. But just like if somebody broke their back in an accident, they're going to have to learn how to walk again. So what we're talking about, like with yours, with like the mental, emotional stuff, you fix the chemistry stuff, and then you get to see what's actually just left of the real issues that are there. If we help somebody fix the pain in their ankle, that they've been walking, antalgic gait, they've been walking in a weird way to try to minimize the pain in their ankle, they're going to have to, even though the pain is gone, they're going to have to retrain or rehab the brain and nervous system so everything works right. So it's very much like these things they do all have to work together. Getting health back from being, to use a term, messed up is not a quick and easy path. Nobody wants to have to do all this work. That doesn't mean, we don't get around it. It's still there. We still have to do it if we want to get real better.
Yeah, my story is a testament to that too, because I actually did, when I figured out the emotional, spiritual root inside myself that was draining the life out of me, literally, it was almost overnight. Then I went from sick and dying to a living person. The recovery was still a long trajectory. Like, I couldn't even walk a block at that stage. There was so much rehab, but I was clearly, and this was a huge distinction for a sensitive person. I hadn't really learned to distinguish the difference between the feeling of living, more living, and the feeling of dying, more dying, right? And I watched that precipice where there was more life than there was a dying process, and then it was forward moving. One of the things I wanted to throw in that, any way that you can gain energy, meaning you're not using energy to suppress, to detox, that energy heals. I don't know how to heal from the big C. I think we say that word quite a few times for this live stream, but that's why I didn't turn around and coach people how to recover from what I went through. But because I was able to let off enough energy, I know you're nodding your head here, the energy knew, right? The freed energy works for you and for life, supports life.
Yes.
So any way that you can get that excess energy, say in the chiropractic example, could that also be one of those paths to, I hate to say Rome, I know that expression is really not what we, yeah, but you get it.
So, oh man. Well, so I wanted to just add two things. Obviously, yes, if somebody is wasting, I mean, it's a joke, but it's true. I say that, like, depression is just a lack of energy production in the brain. or you're using it up too much doing other things. So if you can, let's say, change your perspective, or especially change subconscious programs that just constantly run in the background, then you can not waste energy, right? Which you're saying.
Exactly.
And then there's also the fact that stress, like we just talked about the stress and bile dumping thing earlier. If somebody could stop stressing about things, stress induces bile dumping. So imagine if somebody had way too much stress all day and they're just dumping bile more than they can handle, then that they're just pushing more toxicity that's leaking into their system. So we can both save that. That's how people can have these drastic mental, emotional, spiritual kind of like realizations or awakenings or whatever you want to call them. And then all of a sudden their health problems go away. Because they were wasting so much energy and they were dumping so much toxicity in their system. You could say there's mental, emotional toxicity they're dumping in there too. It doesn't really, I mean, we can't measure these things, so it doesn't really matter. We just want people to get better. Yeah. Like I've always been a fan of, if people are like, well, Dr. Smith, I went and I tried this other thing and it really helped. And I'm like, awesome. I don't tell everybody all the things I've done in my past to try to heal. Like I did, my son was having these weird, like little absence seizures. And I used an energy medicine guy who I knew, who I had trained with in the past when I was exploring all these different avenues. He did his session. These little absence seizures were gone the next day.
Wow.
So I'm not averse to using anything to heal.
Yeah.
And the whole energetic part of it, that part it can be huge and it can just fix things immediately. So back to the chiropractor thing. Okay. So first we must establish that we're just going to talk about vitamin A for a second. It is very normal in the Accutane world, which is 13-cis-retinoic acid, which is one of the metabolites that vitamin A turns into in your body. Okay. 13-cis-retinoic acid by people who eat vitamin A in foods can be found in your blood and in your pee. The very same compound as Accutane, isotretinoin. Okay. I think the study that I had showed that 75% of people who took 13-cis-retinoic acid as Accutane had musculoskeletal problems after however many weeks they took. It was especially in the back. Now, if you were to go and search isotretinoin and sacroiliitis, so inflammation of the SI joint, you will find, I think I found 35 different case study papers. So basically what we're seeing is that vitamin A toxicity is very related to spinal stuff, especially sacroiliitis. And it is well known that vitamin A toxicity causes headaches, which are often associated, like people like to associate them with the neck and other things of that nature. So we're seeing like the whole spine is involved. And then birth defects caused by too much vitamin A, central defects is what they're called, which is part of the spine. Like spina bifida is very related to all of this. So we have lots of spine stuff. And then, like I said, this new study that I just found where they were giving fish retinoic acid, they saw that their vertebra was not forming right, whether it was in utero or whether it was afterwards. So is it possible? And then also me, when I did my thing for the middle back and I avoided gluten and dairy, which is a big vitamin A thing, and nightshades, which also are very high in vitamin A, especially tomatoes and peppers, which I ate a lot of back then. We start reducing the vitamin A. We see musculoskeletal pain go away. We have lots of people who used to go to the chiropractor regularly. I used to be one of them. I used to crack and pop my joints all the time. Go to the chiropractor, get some relief for a couple days, but you got to go back the next week and all that stuff. I don't have to go anymore. We have tons of people saying this program's saving me tons of money on going to my chiropractor because I don't have to go anymore. The pain doesn't happen anymore. My cracking and popping is gone. And all we're doing is fixing the chemistry. We have Steve Gadecki is a chiropractor. And he says now the people who are coming in to see him, he can just ask them about, are you taking vitamin D supplements, which calcify you, by the way? I'll ask him what their supplements are, like what they tend to eat. And he's like, they're just calcifying. Now he sees it. And he's like, I can help them in all these ways to not have to need him. I mean, my goal is to make people not need me, that everybody knows what to do and they don't need me. And I'm out of a job. But is that ever going to happen in my lifetime? No, never.
Yeah, me too, by the way. Yeah.
So
totally relate to that.
So yeah, so if you start working on these things, it is very possible that let's say if let's say your shoulder was connected to your gallbladder, and if you know the spinal stuff that you're seeing, I mean, people have said that, like, if you look at my videos from 5-6 years ago, you know, people will say that they can actually see bone structure changes in my face from that time. And I have a paper showing cleft lip and cleft palate can be caused by vitamin A toxicity. So it can change your face.
Right.
So,
Well, this makes me think, it's sorry to be so personal about it, but because she was so adamant that so I'm like, oh yeah, my cousin dropped me on my head when I was young, and like, could that have done it? But now I'm wondering if it was actually a developmental thing, because my parents really quickly put me not just on formula, but on like cereal for a newborn.
Yeah.
Right.
Not gonna
That's
help.
all fortified with all that stuff, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was so good as a kid about taking my Flintstone vitamins. I actually trained myself to take capsules by swallowing those sharp Flintstones tablets. I was so good. So these things are happening even before we're born. And then as we're born, then, you know, getting on formula and these other things. Yeah. So can they be fixed? Generally, I believe they can. There may be a point of no return as people get really old and really sick. Where I think so the idea is that our body's making waste every day, like toxic waste, kind of like your car makes exhaust. Like to run your car, you're going to make exhaust.
Right.
To live as a human, you're going to make waste products. The question is, so you have to get rid of those waste products faster than you're making them, as a minimum, to not get sicker and sicker. Well, I think as some people get so toxic, it is possible they pass the point of no return where them living on a day-to-day basis is making more toxins than they can get rid of. And then they're also full of tons of toxins that they can't even get past their daily creation. So they can't get into the old stuff. And that's where I think things just start, you know, slowly heading down, or what we call aging. You know, a funny thing in the research was that people's vitamin A in their blood and copper in their blood tend to go up with age. And you got these people out on the internet saying these things are good for people. And I'm going, aging is generally thought to be a kind of sucky process. And their vitamin A and their copper goes up as they age. So I'm going to say that I don't think that's a good thing. Those two going together points toward these are not good things. So
what's your take on iodine? I stopped taking it after I watched your interview. I don't even think you said anything about iodine. I just like, okay, let's do an experiment. How do I feel when I'm on it? How do I feel when I'm off it?
Okay, tell me.
I don't notice any difference. For a canary in the coal mine, honestly, I can't tell if I'm on it or off it.
I'm glad you pointed that out again, because you're sensitive to things and you didn't notice a thing either on or off of it. Okay, so potassium iodide in the research. Potassium iodide, which is in Lugol's, it's in Iodoral, it's in all the big iodine supplements. It's known to be thyroid toxic. Like, it doesn't dissociate into potassium and iodine. It stays as potassium iodide, and I believe it gets stuck in the thyroid. And so it blocks iodine, and it eventually causes more problems. So potassium iodide, I think I did a whole video on my channel about potassium iodide and how there's so much evidence that it is toxic. So generally, the body is only going to use iodine, not iodides. Okay. So there's that. I was doing I call them the iodine crazy people, where they push iodine as like the cure to all of humanity's ill. I did that for a while. I was doing the urine testing in my office. I was giving people iodine. I never saw good stuff come out of it, hardly at all. And when I talked to the doctor who was the consultant for the lab testing company, if I had somebody come back with an iodine test that said they were okay, he'd say, well, they're not okay. And they're missing B2 and B3, and you got to give this to them. And their iodine symporter is not working right. And it was whether they came up low on iodine, the solution was to give them iodine. If they came up okay on iodine, the solution was to give them iodine and give them some B vitamins. And I was like, this is horse crap. Like, if the test doesn't tell us what to do, it's just always the same answer. It's not helping. So it didn't help me. It didn't help my clients. And what the people who do say it helps them, what they generally find over the years is they have to keep taking more and more and more and more.
Right.
That's a bad sign. That's a really bad sign. That means you're shutting down detox. Okay. Iodine is well known in the research that taking iodine, if you have autoimmune thyroid, whether you have autoimmune hypothyroid or autoimmune hyperthyroid. First of all, autoimmunity is toxicity. That's the root cause. It is well demonstrated in the research that if somebody has autoimmune thyroid conditions of either type, taking iodine makes it worse. It increases the antibodies in the blood.
Oh
antibodies are proteins made by the body to bind to toxins. So, might some people, here's an idea, too much thyroid, I mean, they use potassium, they use radioactive potassium iodide to fry thyroids. That's how they fry them. So it makes sense that potentially, so they're destroying the tissue with radioactive potassium iodide. So if you're out there and you're hypothyroid and you take potassium iodide as part of your iodine supplementation and it makes you feel better, I'm going to give you another concept of why that might make you feel better. It's destroying your thyroid cells, bursting them open and spilling thyroid hormone out into your blood, and you feel better because you got more thyroid hormone. You just assaulted your thyroid, do it. And eventually that's going to run out, or then you have to take more iodine to make it happen more because you're running out and you have to push it harder. So the final thing is that selenium, one of the things we use a lot of in the program, selenium is known to lower thyroid antibodies. So which one should people probably be focusing on more is selenium. And then as I always remember this, when I was in, I think my early years of getting out into practice, there was a celiac society in Tucson and they had a big handout. And in the handout, it said autoimmune thyroid of either type should be considered a sister disease to celiac. So they're sensitive to gluten. I just went over gluten's a vitamin A toxicity condition. It's a liver condition. It's the bile. I can show research on the bile acid recipes of hypothyroid is different than hyperthyroid is different than euthyroid. It's like, it's all right there in the research. So generally I tell people, oh, and then the last thing is potassium is almost always very, very helpful for any thyroid condition, like getting some more potassium in your diet, or if you choose to mess around with supplements, potassium is generally helpful in thyroid conditions. So we have the gluten problem. We fix the gluten problem as part of the program. We regularly see that. Okay, so we have the celiac gluten problem. We have the selenium thing. We test hair to fix selenium. We potassium is very helpful. We tend to fix the calcification that goes along with hypothyroid with magnesium. And then we just see these things get better. And we almost never have to give iodine. I tell people, if you're going to mess around with iodine, if you want to know whether you need iodine or not, if you think you're really deficient, if you take the RDA of iodine, like 150 micrograms, I think it is, you will feel it. Like if you need it, you take the RDA, it'll like turn the lights on. I had a woman do this. She lives in Pakistan. She said like iodine deficiency is a big thing in Pakistan. And I looked it up in the research and it was. And she was like, could I take some? I said, sure. She said, the only thing I can get here is iodized salt. And I'm going to try it. And I said, okay. You got a situation. Like, I think it's okay. She did it for a while. She's still doing the program. She does the RDA of iodine. She said it was like turning the lights on. And she did it for a couple months. And then she said, I don't need the salt anymore. So here's what I think about iodine in the body. So one must remember T3 and T4, the thyroid hormones. That number is how many iodine molecules are on the thyroid hormone. T4 is like, it's the estimate I heard was like T3 is 10 times as active as T4. So T4 is kind of very much less active, and T3 is more active. Okay. How does your body mainly convert T4 into T3? Do you know where that happens? In the liver. So if your liver's not running right, you're not going to have the right thyroid hormone balance. So we have that. And then here's the other concept that I think is true for calcium in the body and iodine. people tend to think that like they say, humans, oh, we need all this calcium and we got to get dairy to get this calcium. And they don't realize the Rockefellers were behind the big dairy push in this country from the very beginning. But they made the RDA of calcium such that we could only ever get enough calcium by consuming dairy. And then I go, well, how do the cows get such big bones when they're just eating grass? I don't understand. Like, they can make these giant bones and have 4 times as much calcium in their milk as human milk.
Right.
And yet we have to drink their milk to get it, to make it. Anyway, it doesn't make any sense. So I think what happens is humans are actually very, very good at recycling and reusing calcium. I think humans are very good at recycling and reusing iodine. That's why, I mean, the two main, people will say the main sources of iodine in the human diet these days is either dairy or seaweed. Okay. The dairy has the iodine because they feed it iodine or they feed it seaweed. So we're back to seaweed. So are we saying that humans have to live by the ocean and eat seaweed to get enough iodine? That doesn't make any sense. How did we ever make this country, right? How did people live in the middle of the country without dying of iodine deficiency?
In 4 directions, I couldn't be further from the ocean.
Right.
Yeah.
So the whole, I think we're very good at recycling iodine. I think that's why. And that's why that woman who took some iodine for a while was able to take it, get enough in her system that then she could recycle it. I think a lot of iodine problems are toxicity problems. I could show you in the research how vitamin A messes up iodine metabolism. So we get into all these things. We're just messing these things up. We have been sold an idea of more. Like, we need more nutrients. We need more supplements. We need more. That's not sort of the Canadian thing, but definitely the American thing. We are like, more is better. Nobody out there makes more money on people doing less.
Yes. Also.
Which is what I'm pushing. And then people try to tell me that I'm like grifting and stuff. And I'm like, I'm telling people to buy less of all these things. I think it's hilarious. So we just stop doing these things and then people get better. And then the thing is, okay, so if you put less toxins, here's one other concept. The more important thing, if somebody says, well, which is more important, putting less toxins in or having more nutrients? Like, if I had to pick, I don't want to pick, but if I had to pick, it's less toxins in.
Wow.
Because a toxin that doesn't come into your system doesn't have to be detoxed.
Exactly. And like you're saying, you're probably recycling the nutrients. Yeah.
So you need nutrients to detox things. So if you don't put the toxin in, you don't have to use the nutrients to detox it out.
There you go. Same with energy.
Right. So then, like with people eating, let's say they want to eat liver. And they're like, oh, it has so many nutrients. Well, first of all, most of those are toxic anyway. But they're taking in a bunch of toxins to get these supposed nutrients. You have to, so not only now have you put toxins in your system, but now you have to use more nutrients to detox them out. And the toxins are going to cause damage while they're in there. So we're reducing the need for nutrients by not putting the toxins in the first place, as opposed to increasing the need for nutrients by putting toxins in the name of getting more nutrients. So if we had to pick, that's one of the things. My saying on that is it's more important to stop intoxing than it is to worry about trying to increase detoxing. Because anything you don't put in doesn't have to be detoxed. And then your body can use that energy, like we're talking about, to detox other things.
Nice. I just did a video for the House of Free Will, my private association, this morning on like the social side of that, or the like when we're around company that's toxic, we are impressed by that. You can't not be impressed by that. You take something in. You're going to have to, you watch a terrible movie, you listen to somebody complain for 8 hours, or what, the fear porn in the so-called truth movement. All of that stuff, you have to detox. I'm very, very well aware. I'll go to bed at night and I'll have to spend sometimes an hour letting go of the mental, emotional, spiritual toxicity. And if I just don't do that, right? And I keep good company, and I keep company that's encouraging much more of a, a creative state and all of that kind of thing. Like, why do I need to expose myself to the toxicity? There's no good reason for that.
Yeah.
You know?
One of my favorite sayings on that is it was very simple. This one guy on a bodybuilding website said it. He's like, don't be there. He's like, that's the solution. Just don't be there. And I went, wow, that is so applicable to so many things. I mean, he was kind of like some of the examples. He was like, if you're an alcoholic and you're trying to quit, don't go to the bar. Like, don't be there.
Right.
And I was just like, wow. And I thought that is so applicable to so many things.
Exactly.
It's not running away. It's just not, you can't, just like we're talking about with the skin and with the gut, like you're going to absorb it. So if you don't want to absorb it, don't put it there. Don't be there. And it's so much easier. Yeah.
Exactly. And do you think that the healthier you get, the more you can actually tolerate the toxicity, or is that wrong thinking?
That's a tough thing because, okay.
Like when you go on holidays and you don't want to, reject every restaurant or all of those kind of things and live a normal life, not neurotic.
This is a mixed thing. So as you get healthier in general, you feel better, right? That's the assumption. The assumption is that you're feeling better. Okay. So if you're feeling better and you now know what toxins are and what they do to you, we see people, they get less tolerance of feeling bad. Like, so they start doing things that they know they're not supposed to do. Is it making them break? Is it breaking them down? Are they falling apart? No, most of the time they're not. But they go, I don't like feeling this way. I know exactly what I'm doing that's making me feel this way, and I don't like it. So then they get to choose. Are you going to keep doing it? I mean, we have people come back all the time. Okay, one of the things we've seen in the program is like people in the program who choose to go drink alcohol. They actually, in a certain way, they're jokingly complaining that it's much more difficult for them to get a buzz from the alcohol than it used to be. And then they say they don't really have a hangover either. So they kind of find it becomes kind of like, why am I doing this? Why am I having to drink, 3 times as much alcohol to get a buzz when they know it's a poison? And they realize they're just searching for the buzz, but it takes all this alcohol. Why are they doing this? And this is not people who drink on a regular basis. This is people who just go and this is what we've seen. The very same detox pathway that detoxes vitamin A is the same detox pathway that detoxes alcohol. So we are unloading that system. And then all of a sudden you can run more things through it. Not that that's desirable. It's just, it just is.
Yeah.
So are they going to fall apart as quickly? No, they have kind of like not a new lease on life, but they have a lot less toxins in their liver. Their liver's working a lot better. People tend to not tolerate feeling bad when they've been given this empowerment to know what makes them feel bad. So it's kind of weird. It's their tolerance for feeling bad goes down generally because they feel so good all the time. And they just go, I don't want to feel that way. Like I know I can go and do things that I know I shouldn't. And I know I'm not going to feel good. Like I know that like I need my potassium on a daily basis to really be running like as well as I can. I joke that I'm like a sports car, like a really finely tuned sports car, in that if I'm doing the right things, if I'm at home and I'm in my routines and I know exactly, like I've got my bananas around because I do really well with bananas. If I got those around and I'm eating pretty good, everything runs great. I go on vacation and my foods change and my routine changes. And I'm just like, I got to get back to normal. Like it's not that I'm falling apart. I just don't feel as good. And I want to be the fine-tuned sports car and drive fast and not be putting crappy fluids in and having things not run right. So it's just
what would you do to turn that around? So you'd been on vacation and then you wanted to track back.
Yeah. Well, actually I talked to, I figured out when I travel, I'm like, I need to have my bananas. I need to have like, I want to have these things around because I know my vacation is much nicer and I feel better when I just have these simple things around. I've really kind of narrowed it down. Like potassium is a huge thing for me. And then just getting enough protein, because a lot of times you go on vacations, right? And you don't get enough protein because you're eating like crappy carby I'm not against carbs, but like crappy, overly carby bad fat restaurant food, and just then you start feeling bad.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, again, like I said, it's not falling apart. It's just going, I should not be feeling this. As you get healthier, I think, kind of like you were saying about being sensitive, I think your ability to judge how you're feeling becomes more sensitive. Like you can say, I'm at like 100% right now, or I'm at like 50%. And I'd like to be more up here than down here. Right. And but people can take more, but still, like if you're around a scent, like people in my program know that generally things that smell are toxic.
Right. Because your liver processes everything you smell, correct?
I mean, it goes into your lungs, and your lungs are made to absorb stuff. And we actually do detox aldehydes. If you've ever been around somebody and their breath is just like a sewer, or like, what do we smell on people's breath a lot? Sulfur, garlic, onions. Like, why is our body even trying to get rid of these things through the breath? The weirdest thing is that people will say they like the smell of garlic and onions when it's either raw or when they're cooking it. But then if it's on somebody's breath, they don't like it. It's the same smell.
But here's an interesting factor, because I've used a lot of garlic. I just grew a lot of garlic, and chewing it is a disaster. Like that will make me feel sick. That will, give me that bad breath. But what I've learned to do is swallow large amounts of it. And there's no odor from that. So what's happening, do you think?
Well, you may want to stop doing that. I'm going to do a live stream on it.
Oh,
garlic,
good.
Yeah. Garlic is very full of sulfur. Sulfur in general slows down your ALDH, which is, again, the most important detox enzyme. I could show you lots of research on that. So, which will then slow down your bile production. And there's another video of a guy who did ECG, or he did the brain scans. That was it EKG or the electroencephalogram, EEG. And he would show that like people's brains stopped connecting across the midpoint after they would consume garlic. And he could show it, like if they ate garlic at lunch, he'd watch their EEG and he'd be like, oh, there it is. It's not connecting.
The yogis in India say don't eat garlic and onions because you can't meditate. So that would explain, or that.
So garlic, actually Kelsey, who I think was on the chat here a while ago, Kelsey keeps bugging me to do a show on garlic and onions. So yeah, but we're big on one of the things we do. Oh yeah, Kelsey, I think she had a spiritual experience and was completely free of chronic pain. You still had a ways to go, but that was a big deal. Yeah, so these things, they happen. Yeah, absolutely. But that garlic and onions thing, we generally have people avoid high sulfur foods because sulfur slows detox. Sulfur needs to be detox. I mean, sulfur has detox enzymes like sulfite oxidase. So cruciferous vegetables, broccoli, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, cabbage, and then the alliums, onions, garlic. Egg whites are very high in sulfur. Egg yolks are very high in vitamin A. So we don't tend to do too many eggs. And so the sulfur thing, you may want to reconsider that after this. And then the fact that if you were to chew it, your body tells you this is horrible. I don't like this. But you're putting it, what you're doing. I mean, this is the reality. We've all done this. It's like the people who will freeze liver cubes and then swallow them because they taste so horrible that they want to get it past their toxin sensors. Your toxin sensors told you this is poison. Spit it out. Like think if you were a little kid, like you give a little kid a sip of black coffee, they'll spit it out. You give a little kid a bite of totally 100% dark chocolate, they will spit it out. You give a kid a bite of raw garlic, they will spit it out. Like if you think of like what kids would spit out, they're listening to their instincts, to their toxin sensors. And they will say, this is not good.
So what if it tastes good? Like I don't like raw garlic anymore at all. Like I'll only use it medicinally and periodically, but it tastes so good cooked in a meal. So is your sensors giving you a bad message there?
Well, nobody eats garlic by itself.
True.
Everybody combines it with other things. And then also humans have adapted. We can adapt to toxic things and then start to believe they're good for us. The idea of this adaptation is like a survival thing. Let's say you're out in the wild and the only thing you can eat is this certain weed. And you can live on it. It doesn't taste good. It tastes horrible, but you can live on it. Your body will eventually think about mental, emotional, spiritual right now. You're sitting there and you have to eat this weed every day. is it better for you, for your brain to adapt and say, this isn't so bad, I might even like this after a while, as opposed to every day you're eating and going, oh my God, I can't stand this. It's so horrible. I can't believe I'm putting this in my face and I have to eat. And it's just, so you see how like mental, emotionally, we can have beneficial adaptations to toxic things. And this is like where people get into their coffees and their wines and all this stuff. And they're like, it has notes of this and all these little fine tuning things that they're doing for a poison, because that's what we do with these things.
Right.
So,
oh my goodness, there's way too much to talk about. Look, here we are almost 2.5 hours into it, and barely scratching the surface of my list. No pressure.
This is normal for me.
Yes, I'm sure. I don't know if you're open to a part 2, but there's
absolutely
a lot. Yeah. Okay. That would be great. Someone asked about fasting. So I'm curious what your take on that is. Like, is it's a less intaking of poisons for a few hours a day, or, what's your opinion?
Well,
there?
we've had there, if somebody were to search on my Twitter for fasting, they'll see, I mean, okay. One of the things that eating does is eating triggers bile dumps.
Right. Would you like? That's good, right?
So, well, is that good? I mean, to get rid of bile, yes. So let's say if we talked about things that can suppress bile dumping and bile production. Not eating would be one of the things, because you just don't need to dump bile. Right. So if the thing would be here, like the example would be, let's say somebody goes and they fast for 3 days or a week or whatever. What do they say you're supposed to do when you stop fasting? Eat very light, correct? And as light, they mean not fatty.
Okay.
Because what would you dump if you ate a fatty meal right after you've been fasting for a week? You would dump a ton of bile that has built up all at once into your system, and it would not feel good. So, and then sometimes, or people do their fasting. I don't mean little fasting. I mean to disparage it. Like if they do their fasting and then they feel good while they're fasting, right? They're not dumping bile and leaking into their system. That's why they feel better. And their liver can catch up on cleaning what was in their blood, right? You're not adding more load to the liver. Like when I was told all those 50 pills you're taking a day have to go through your liver. And I was like, that's right. So the liver can catch up by not putting things in there. Okay. Your liver also requires proteins and minerals and other things to run the detox system. So if you fast too long, you're going to run low on those, right? Because you're not taking anything in. So if people they do their fasting and then they get done and they go back to eating and all of a sudden they feel bad again, what did they fix? Right? They just started dumping bile and leaking into their system again. So that's why they didn't necessarily get rid of it. Fasting doesn't necessarily speed up detox. It just kind of postpones it a ways. I'm not against all fasting, but I have seen way too many, especially women, get messed up from like intermittent fasting and other things of these nature. Like women don't handle fasting as well as men do. I think it's mainly just men are better at burning fat for energy. And women are kind of designed to not starve, because babies are really important to take care of. And so we don't want, that's why men would sacrifice food for the women and the children, because that's the next generation. It's just kind of like built into us for these things. So anyway, fasting, some people can do some fasting. I think it's all right. But the detox process does require nutrients. And once you understand the bile thing, like there's been people who are like, wow, when I got to day 9 of fasting, like all of a sudden everything hit the fan. And now with what they know with my work, they're like, I dumped bile on day 9 and it was horrible. I felt absolutely horrible. And they're like, now they know what happened. And they're asking me, why did that happen? I go, I don't know. Your liver just stored up enough bile, or your gallbladder had enough bile in it that it was like, we're just going to dump it. We're just going to dump it anyway. So there's theories of bile dumps that I've tried to figure out, like why does everybody quote unquote get sick when the first cold comes in, like when it gets cold in the weather? Why is there that? Because I'm not believing it's a virus jumping around. Why do so many people get sick? Well, here's the idea. Cold, if we talked about heat dumping bile more, right? Heat generally speeds things up. In chemistry, heat makes reactions go faster. Heat makes we are warm-blooded. Heat helps us run. Okay. So if it's going to get really cold, cold tends to slow things down and make things slower. Okay. So if your body felt the cold snap come in and it goes, uh-oh, winter's here. We're not going to be able to get rid of much bile for months. We should dump this last batch really strongly and try to get as much out as we can now that we know that the cold just came in, and it dumps it. And then you get a cold and then it goes away. And, then the rest of the winter, usually people aren't getting sick much more the rest of the winter, but this is a theory that we have. And then when people do cold all the time, it suppresses the bile production. And this is how things like the cold plunges and the Wim Hof may suppress certain autoimmune conditions, for example, because you're in the cold all the time, suppressing the bile dumping.
I knew there was no good reason to do that.
Well, there are good reasons. I'm just going to say I'm not totally against that, because as it's very good for your mental state to be able to go and sit in the cold and calm down. So it's like a stress that you can modulate. So you are suffering, but you're learning how to relax within the suffering, which has its own benefits. However, doing it, more than you need to, just because somebody's, if you're trying to get rid of a disease with cold, you're just suppressing it. Like they say in Chinese medicine, ice is for dead people. We are warm-blooded.
There you go. Interesting about the stress response. I was just, my chiropractor has some kind of scan thing, and apparently I have a really high tolerance for stress. And I immediately recognize that is a blessing and a curse, because I will take on too much stress compared to somebody who had a lower tolerance for that. So it's easy to abuse that. But yeah,
there are always gifts and curses at the same time.
Yeah, exactly. Most things, they require discrimination and purpose for actually seeing what is the point of anything at all. So yeah, lots more subjects to carry on with, and I would love to make a part 2 with you. So this is good. I'm very happy how this has gone. I was afraid I'd just piss you off and we wouldn't.
Oh gosh, no.
Yeah. And it can be overwhelming, but I just feel like getting to the bottom of things more so. Again, I want the truth more than I want it to be right. I'm also always willing to go back and just say, yeah, I was actually dead wrong. And let's, the work that I'm doing, if you don't mind, I'll talk about the Journey Code Coaching Certification training that I've got coming up. And it's a 7-month, very deep dive, epic hero's journey process of, some people find it easy to go out and build and create in the world, and then have a hard time doing that more inner game work. And this is how I saved my life from cancer. There was obviously many, many other factors, but no matter what I did, I was still a dying person until I recovered the energy inside myself that was hidden entirely from me. Other people could probably see it, but I was not seeing it. And so this is it was actually born of the pandemic. So this is what I did instead of eating bonbons and sitting around in my pajamas. I created this whole training, and going through it, you pick up the tools that you need to recover energy that is lost. It can have a profound influence on your health, and it can give you profound insight about your health as well. Where to go, where to research, where to, that you like, oh, try this, can be a big part of it, or it can actually be the force that dissolves the disease, or lets off your consumption of energy trying to fight against something when there is a root in that area. And then doing the journey yourself is the requisite to helping people, to guide them through their own unconscious, because it's all free will of choice. I don't believe you can do this for anyone. The same way, Garrett, that you talk about it being, that they have 100% responsibility. I make people sign their life away, 100% responsibility for absolutely everything that they do, because you're in the unknown. You're completely in uncharted territory. You don't know what is going to happen when you pop the lid off some of those cans of worms at all. right? Like when you help people make health choices, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, it's been like wild around here. But when you have people to walk with, you have good company, you have really supportive people that are themselves taking that risk to grow and to heal. And again, hero's journey, it's not just enough to solve your own problems. If you don't turn around and help someone as you are, then you're not really fulfilling, and you're not going to recirculate all of those nutrients that you have been, fortunate, smart enough, lucky enough, whatever it is to have in your life. So this is starting on the first class doesn't start until the 18th, next Wednesday. The orientation is this week. If for any reason someone missed the orientation, it's not the end of the world. Everything's recorded. But now is a good time to apply. I don't take just anybody. You can't come up and just buy this training from me. It's got to be by conversation, by application, so that I know you're actually ready for it. It's not a beginner's training. I can help beginners. I have a number of apprentices that are really good at working with new people, but this is the deep dive. There are a few spots left. So if anyone feels called to it, please do click my website. Actually, the direct link is in the show notes. As is Dr. Garrett Smith's nutritiondetective.com. And then this is his YouTube and X. Is there anywhere else that you would like people to find you in particular?
I mean, my main website is nutritiondetective.com. Yeah, you got the x.com, you got the YouTube. Those are the main ones. All of my other links can be found on my YouTube links, but those are the main places that I'm at. Yeah.
Okay. And I love the detective part, because I always feel like a detective myself in my own life, that I've had failed experiments too. So there's some limits to those, right? And I like guidance, but I'm super picky about where the guidance comes from. Often interview first and vet them live that way. And so I'm very pleased to meet you. I think you've got a really good head on your shoulders. I think you've got great experience. We haven't even dived into any of the testimonials I know that I've heard through other parts of your work. And so yeah, I'm very curious to pursue this path a little bit more and see where that goes.
Awesome. Well, I would love to do a part 2. So
okay,
let me know.
Okay, fantastic. Any closing words for just right now?
No, I mean, I don't think so. I think we covered a lot, and a lot of my treatment philosophy and all that stuff. So yeah, the easiest place to start if somebody wants to get more into toxic bile theory would be on my YouTube channel, live stream number 71. That's kind of the basics of toxic bile theory. And then if you wanted to find the easiest synopses, or the easiest place to get started with my vitamin A work, would be on my Twitter, my pinned thread of threads, I call it on Twitter. So it's just a thread of a bunch of threads where you can go through a lot of the research that I put together, and those are good places to get started. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Garrett Smith, and everybody in the chat who's chimed in and asked your questions. I appreciate that. And we shall see you pretty soon coming up. You can always join the House of Free Will, which is my private association where we get to know each other better than you can in a live stream kind of a place. Maybe, I don't know if you have had the bandwidth for it, but maybe you could come and do a workshop with us in the House of Free Will sometime.
Sure. Yeah.
That would be amazing. That would be amazing. I just always put you on the spot while you're on a live stream. So I have to say yes. All right, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. I look forward to seeing you soon, and bye for now.